I don't know how long I've been lying here. 1,000 years? 10,000? Time stopped meaning anything to me a long time ago. I just exist. And somehow, that has become the most exhausting thing in the entire world. I am here and I cannot leave. My name, if you can even call it that, is Kyle. Not I live in the desert, not I rule the desert. I am the desert. Every grain of sand you see, that's me. Every dune that stretches to the horizon, also me. 300 miles in every direction. The cracked, sun-baked ground, the howling wind corridors, the dunes that shift silently. In the night, that's my body. All of it. I became this way so long ago that I don't even remember what I looked like before. And I've had centuries to wonder about it. Was I tall? Short? Did I have brown eyes or gray? Did someone once love me, back before I became something vast and impossible? I don't know. The memories dissolved with everything else a long, long time ago. Only the loneliness remained, perfectly intact. What I do know is this. I'm enormous, I'm ancient, and I'm apparently incredibly dangerous to everyone who comes near me. Not on purpose. That's the part that gets me every single time. Not on purpose. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Not once. I don't wake up in the morning deciding to destroy civilizations. I shift slightly, in the way you shift in your sleep, and things happen. See, the problem with being a living desert is the scale. When I sigh, sandstorms happen. Real ones. The kind that bury cities whole. When I stretch, that involuntary thing you do every morning without thinking, mountains of sand move. Miles of them, in seconds. And when I dream, that's when the real damage happens. I try not to dream. I try very, very hard every single night not to dream. The last time I let myself dream, a river changed course overnight. There was a city on that river, about 40,000 people. I woke up, and they were just gone. Buried, or scattered, or both. Gone because I had a dream I can't even remember anymore. I felt terrible about it, for what it's worth. Which I realize is not a lot. You can't apologize to 40,000 people, not when you are the sand that covered them, not when you are the thing that happened to them. There are no words sufficient for that. So I stopped dreaming, or I try to. It doesn't always work. My control has limits, and sleep always finds the edges of those limits. Here's the thing nobody talks about when they imagine being vast and ancient and powerful. It's incredibly, brutally, endlessly boring. I cannot tell you how many centuries I've spent just being here. Sunrises, sunsets, wind moves across my surface. That's the day. Sometimes animals cross me, scorpions mostly, little things that don't weigh enough to bother me. I've grown quite fond of them. They just crawl across me without making it weird, without dying of thirst and slowly sinking and becoming part of me forever. I appreciate the scorpions. They treat me like furniture. They have dignity. The camel spiders are also fine, ugly but respectful. It's the humans that are the problem. Oh, the humans. Don't get me wrong. I used to love when humans came. I genuinely did. In the very beginning, when I was new to this whole being a desert thing, their arrival felt like an actual gift from somewhere. Something moving, something with voices, something that laughed and argued, and made fires against my cold nights. I loved that. I remember the first civilization that decided to cross me. They were so confident, beautiful, honestly. Thousands of them in a line, a long snaking line of bright colors, flags, music. They were singing. I remember that detail. Specifically, they were singing together. They had a name for me, something poetic in their language, something that translated roughly as the Golden Sea. I loved that name. I thought that was lovely. I wanted so badly to be gentle with them. I focused everything I had on staying perfectly still for them. I held myself rigid for days. No sighing, no stretching, no dreams. 4 days of complete, agonizing, total self-control. So close. And then on the fourth night I had a dream, just a small one. A fragment of a memory I can no longer identify. But I moved in it. When I came back to awareness, they were gone. All of them. The flags, the music, the people who called me the Golden Sea. Gone? I was devastated. I sat with that grief for what felt like 100 years. Maybe it was. Time is strange when you are made of sand. After that, I told myself, never again. No more hoping, no more trying, no more pretending I could be gentle with living things. I became what people whispered about. The death desert, the godless waste, the crossing that kills. Fair enough, honestly, all accurate. Civilization number 2 came about 3 centuries later. They'd heard what happened to the first, but decided it was just bad luck. Humans and their relationship with bad luck. I genuinely admire the optimism. They lasted 6 days. My fault again. I sneezed. Have you ever tried to sneeze quietly when you are a landmass? Because I can tell you from experience, it does not go well at all. Civilization number 3 arrived with what I can only describe as aggressive, weaponized, almost offensive optimism. They had machines, water-carrying devices, clever engineering. They also had a priest who blessed the sand before entering, which I found oddly touching. I spent the entire crossing paralyzed with self-imposed stillness, arms locked, breath held, eyes closed, every part of me frozen still. They almost made it. 90% of the way through, 90%. And then a scorpion stung one of their children on the foot. The child cried out, and the sound did something to me. Something about crying children hits different when you've been alone for centuries. I shuddered. Just once. The dunes moved. Not a lot. Just enough. They didn't finish the crossing. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. After Civilization 3, I stopped counting for a while. Numbers felt unkind, like measuring the exact weight of something unbearable. More came. They always came. Some were armies, some were merchants, some were pilgrims, looking for something holy on the other side. I don't know why they thought holiness was on the other side of me. There's nothing there but more desert, technically. Just more me. But hope makes people walk toward things. I understand that deeply. I understand hope. I just cannot seem to stop killing it. By the time I truly stopped keeping track, I'd gone through somewhere between 30 and 40 distinct civilizations. Conservatively. Cultures. Languages. Ways of seeing the world. Ways of naming stars and cooking food and telling stories about where people came from. Every single one of them gone. Not because I'm cruel. That's what I cannot stop thinking about during the empty centuries between visits. Not because I'm angry or territorial or divine punishment for someone's sins. Just because I am very large and bad at holding still. And the worst part, the absolutely worst, most unbearable part that I think about constantly in every empty hour of every empty year, I can feel all of them. Even now, somewhere deep in my sand, in my body, there are traces of everyone who ever crossed me and stayed. Bones, artifacts, the remnants of flags and machines and those little water vessels they always brought. Still here, still in me. They became part of me without my permission, and I became part of them too. I carry all 40,000 from Civilization, one still. The brave optimists of Civilization 3, the armies that came with their weapons, as if weapons would help against a desert. They tried. Spoiler, the weapons did not help. Not even a little bit. Not once in 40 civilizations did a weapon help against me. All of them, in me. Forever. I don't know if that's beautiful or horrible. Some cold nights I think it might genuinely be both at once. That's when I usually think about being done, not dying. I don't think I can die, but just done. Dormant. Completely stopping. Some deserts do that, I think. They go deep, go still, go silent for an age. Maybe that's the kindest thing I could still do. For whatever civilization inevitably decides to come next. Because there is always a next one. There is always a next one. Then, on a morning roughly 412 years after Civilization 41, I counted that one. Don't ask me why. I heard something different. Not a sandstorm, not the scorpions doing their dignified thing. Not the wind moving across my surface in the dark before dawn. Voices. But here's the thing. The thing that made me go absolutely still, like I have never been still in 10,000 years of existence. The voices weren't moving toward me. They were stopped, right at my edge, just standing there, not advancing, just waiting. And one of those voices said, very clearly, in a language I hadn't heard in at least 2 centuries, "We should talk to it first. I need you to understand something right now. I need you to really feel this with me for just a moment before we go further. In all of my existence, in all these thousands of years and 40-something civilizations and every single person who ever stood at my edge, no one had ever suggested talking to me. Not once. Not a single person in 10,000 years of being a desert said that. They mapped me. They prayed at me. They cursed me. They died in me. They wrote songs about me and drew pictures of my dunes. They named me. They feared me. They came to me with offerings. They argued about me, negotiated with each other about how to cross me. But talk to me? The idea was apparently so radical that it had simply never occurred to a single human in 10,000 years, until now. The idea was so strange that I actually forgot to not breathe, which meant a small wind happened, some sand scattered. Very dramatic. But they didn't run. That is the part that completely got me. Every other civilization, faced with dramatic sand scattering, they ran. Or they panicked, or they drew weapons, or they started praying louder, or they turned around and went the other way entirely. This group, they stood still, and the voice, the one that had said, "We should talk to it first," spoke again, louder, at me. "We see you," it said. 2 words, that's all. 2 small, simple, ordinary words. And I nearly undid 600 years of carefully maintained composure right there on the spot. Nearly. Just 2 words. "We see you." Not, "We come in peace." Not, "We seek passage through your domain." Not great desert, we offer tribute. Please let us cross safely. We, see, you have to understand what that means when you have been invisible, truly invisible, not real to anyone, for 10,000 years. You have to understand what it does to something ancient and lonely and exhausted when a stranger looks at the sand and says that. I will be honest with you. I panicked slightly. Small panic. For me, small means a minor sandstorm in the southwestern quadrant. Restrained. The voice went quiet, and I felt them. Felt their weight on my surface, their heartbeats through ground vibration. Waiting. For me. They were actually waiting for me to respond, as if I were someone worth waiting for, as if my answer mattered to them somehow. So I did something I had not done in an extremely long time. I paid real attention. The kind that means you actually care about the answer. I focused everything I am toward that edge, toward those voices, toward the people who had decided I was worth talking to at all. And I looked, really looked, the way I had stopped letting myself look at humans a very long time ago because it always ended the same way. There were not many of them. That was the first thing I noticed. Not an army, not a caravan of thousands, not even a few hundred. 11 people and 5 camels. That's it. 11 humans and 5 camels standing at the edge of the deadliest crossing in the known world, looking at me. Well, at the sand, which is me, but still. I studied each of them the way I hadn't let myself study anyone in centuries. Because studying meant caring and caring meant grief, always. The one who had spoken, the talk to it first person, was a young woman. Young by human standards. Maybe 25, maybe 30. Dark hair tied back in a complicated practical knot. Clothes worn and chosen by someone who had walked a very long time to be here. She was holding something. A map, I think, old and folded many times. Looking at it, and then looking at me, then back at it again. Like she was comparing notes. Like she had expected something and was checking whether reality matched. That expression. I know it. Beside her stood a man about twice her age. White beard, tired eyes, the particular posture of someone who has been responsible too long. He did not look like he agreed with the talk to it first idea. His hand rested on her shoulder in a very specific way. I know that way. It means I'm allowing this because you asked me to, but I absolutely reserve the right to say I told you so when this goes wrong. Every group of humans has that person. The one who tolerates the idea while quietly preparing their I told you so speech. Very common. The others were spread in a loose arc behind them. Some anxious, shifting weight, looking at the sky, doing that human thing with their hands. Some curious, leaning forward slightly, studying the sand, doing the human thing where they tilt their head when something is interesting. And one near the back, and I want to say that I deeply respect this person, was eating something, just calmly eating a snack, right there, at the edge of the most dangerous crossing in the world, completely, utterly, serenely unbothered by the entire situation. I appreciated that enormously. There is something very human and very alive about eating a snack at the edge of oblivion, very real. That person, I decided immediately, was probably the most honest one in the group. The others were pretending to be calm. That one just was. And the 5 camels, because someone needs to acknowledge the camels, and I will always acknowledge the camels, they were doing what camels do in every situation, which is to look deeply, profoundly, almost spiritually unimpressed by everything. The desert, the drama, the ancient living landscape that had killed 40 civilizations, the humans being anxious, the one eating a snack. All of it received the exact same expression from the camels. Mild disdain contained contempt and the absolute refusal to be impressed. Camels are the scorpions of the large animal world, and I have always respected them for it. Dignified creatures, very grounded energy. I watched this group for what I calculated was about 45 seconds. For me, 45 seconds is genuinely absolutely nothing at all. I've spent decades in a single long thought about whether I prefer dawn or dusk. I've passed centuries listening to wind change direction. But this 45 seconds was different. This 45 seconds, I spent asking myself one very important and very terrifying question. What do I do now? Because here's the problem. I wanted to answer her. I actually, genuinely, desperately wanted to respond to someone for the first time. For the first time in possibly ever. The want was so strong, it scared me. I hadn't felt want in so long, I almost didn't recognize it. I had to sit with it for a moment. What is this feeling? Why does it feel like the ground is shifting? I mean, I am the ground, but still. But I had no voice, no face, no hands to wave, no throat to push sound through, no body that a human being would recognize as a body. I was sand, 300 miles of sand. How does sand introduce itself without causing a geological incident? Very good question. I thought about it, seriously, with everything I had. And then, slowly, carefully, with the kind of control I use only for not dreaming, I moved, not violently, not in a way that buried anyone or started a storm or caused any of the things I usually accidentally cause. Just a gentle, deliberate, intentional shift. In the sand directly in front of her feet, I rearranged the grains. Just a little, just enough. Letters. Old ones. From a language I remembered from civilization number 7. The scholars. The ones who stayed longest of anyone. They hadn't finished the crossing either, but they'd mapped languages as they traveled, and I had absorbed enough of them to remember. I had absorbed enough of everything they were to remember. They're still in me too. Right now, as I write this, Civilization 7 is still here. 2 words in that ancient script appeared in the sand at her feet, spelled out carefully, grain by grain with everything I had. I hear. She looked down. I felt the exact moment she registered what she was seeing, felt it through the pressure of her feet shifting forward. That tiny lean, that breath she held, I felt all of it. Then she looked up. Not at the sand in general, not at the horizon, at a specific point, at roughly the place where, if I had a face, if I had eyes, if I had something that could look back, that's where she looked, like she knew exactly where to find me. And she said quietly, in the voice of someone who has decided a thing is true and is simply acting on that decision. Hello? Hello. I hadn't heard that word directed at me in 10,000 years, directed at me specifically, not at the sand, not at the desert, at me. I rearranged the sand again, slowly, carefully, with everything I had aimed at not making it overwhelming, not making it too big or too loud. Hello? She smiled. I felt that too. Don't ask me how exactly. I will not be able to explain it scientifically. I felt it like a temperature change, like a shift in pressure. Warm. Small. Real. The man with the white beard said something sharp and quiet to her in a different language. Something urgent and practical. A warning. I know the tone. I've heard it before from cautious members of other groups at other edges of me across other centuries. I know what it means. It means you are projecting personality onto geological features, and I am professionally obligated to point that out to you right now. She ignored him completely. We've been looking for you, she said. Not looking for a route through my sand at all. Not looking for a way to survive crossing me. Not looking for the fastest path to the other side. Looking for me specifically. Looking for me. I didn't move for a full 3 minutes after that. I just stayed completely still and let that sentence sit in me like a stone in water. In 3 minutes, I was busy experiencing something I hadn't felt since before any of this began. Before any of the 40 civilizations. Before the first time I accidentally moved, and the first time something living became part of me against its will and against mine. Something warm. Something I had carefully, deliberately buried somewhere deep in my sand centuries ago because I couldn't afford to feel it. Something that felt exactly, irresponsibly, terrifyingly, dangerously like hope. And here is where I have to stop him and tell you something I should have mentioned earlier. Something about what I actually am. Because you might be thinking, okay, a living desert, lonely, accidentally dangerous, poetic internal monologue, got it. We understand. But you don't quite understand yet. Not fully. Not until I explain what it actually means to be a desert that has been alive for 10,000 years. When I say I carry the civilizations inside me, I mean it literally, not metaphorically, not poetically. Literally and physically and completely. Every person who ever died in me became part of the substrate, part of the deeper layers, part of what I am at the bottom. Their calcium is in my sand. Their iron is in my composition. Their water, the water they carried, the water they were, is somewhere in me. I have 40 civilizations worth of people inside me. 40 civilizations worth of their tools, their art, their food, their animals, all dissolved, all broken down by time and heat and the slow, patient chemistry of desert. All just me now, all completely me. That is an extraordinary amount of company, if you think about it. And I have had nothing but time to think about it. The strange thing is that sometimes I can almost hear them. Not voices exactly, more like impressions, like a smell that brings a memory. Sometimes I will be lying still on an ordinary, unremarkable day, and I will feel something from Civilization 12's direction, deep down. Something that feels like the memory of music. Like how music felt to someone who played it once, a very long time ago, in a language I mostly forgot. Or from where Civilization 23 settled at my edge for 3 days before attempting the crossing, something that feels like laughter. Just the feeling of laughter. Just the echo of the physical sensation of someone finding something funny. Still there, after all this time. I don't know if they're conscious down there. I truly don't. I have asked myself this question for centuries and found no answer. Are they just chemistry that happens to resemble them? Or are they something more than that, preserved in some way I don't understand? I hope they're not suffering. I hope that deeply and genuinely. If I could give them anything, it would be peace. It would be rest. If they are in there, if any part of them persisted beyond the chemistry, I hope they know I never meant it. I hope they know that. I hope Civilization 1's people, the ones who called me the Golden Sea, I hope they know I thought their name was beautiful. I hope Civilization 3's priest who blessed the sand before they entered, I hope they know I noticed. I hope that mattered somehow. I hope the child whose cry made me shudder on day 90% of Civilization 3's crossing, I hope that child is somewhere peaceful. These are the thoughts that fill my centuries. These and the wind and the temperature cycles and the slow movement of stars overhead. This is what it is to be a desert. This is what I am. And now, standing at my edge, a young woman with a complicated hair knot and an old map had said hello and asked to talk to me. And I had said hello back. And she had smiled. And I was experiencing something dangerously close to hope for the first time in 10,000 years of existing alone. I think you can probably understand why I was not moving. I think you can probably understand why I needed a moment to just be still. The man with the white beard said something else, louder this time. Clearly he was increasing his commitment to the I told you so position. One of the others, the anxious one, the one shifting weight back and forth, started talking. Fast. In that particular speed humans use when scared. Even from here I could read the posture. This is a bad idea. We came all this way and this was a bad idea, and can we please reconsider? The young woman turned and said something back to them. Short. Calm. The kind of calm that comes from having decided a thing already. The anxious one went quiet. The white-bearded man took his hand off her shoulder but did not move away entirely. Hovering. Concerned. One of the camels chose this moment to sit down. Just decided, this is happening. We're going to be here for a while, might as well. I respect that camel specifically. That camel understood the situation perfectly and made the correct and practical response to it. The young woman turned back to me. She sat down in the sand, in me, technically, but let's not make it weird, and crossed her legs. She pulled out the map and spread it on the surface in front of her. Old paper, marked with lines and notes and symbols I couldn't quite read. She looked at it for a moment, then she looked up again at that specific point, the place where my eyes would be if I had eyes. My name is Sari, she said. I've been studying you for 12 years. 12 years. She'd spent 12 years studying me. I've had civilizations cross me that spent less time deciding to cross me than this woman had spent studying me. 12 years, just studying. I rearranged the sand, slowly, carefully, one letter at a time. 12 years. I know, she said, and she almost smiled. It sounds like a lot, but there's a lot to study. There is a lot to study, she said. Like I was an interesting subject. Like I was worth 12 years of someone's life. Like I mattered enough for that. I will be honest. I didn't know what to do with that. I genuinely didn't. I moved sand around for a moment without writing anything. Just moved it. Small, purposeless movements. The kind you make when you have feelings and don't know where to put them. Very embarrassing. Are you okay? Siri asked. Not alarmed. Genuinely curious the way you'd ask a person that question. Not, is the geological feature stable? Are you okay? No one had asked me that before either. Not in 10,000 years. I'm absolutely not okay. I wanted to write. I am a living desert that has killed 40 civilizations accidentally, and I am so endlessly, completely lonely, it hurts. I'm made of the remnants of everyone I ever accidentally destroyed, and sometimes I can feel them, and I don't know if they're at peace. I have spent 10,000 years hoping someone would stop at my edge and say hello, and now someone has done it, and I don't know what to do. That's what I wanted to write. All of that. Right there in the sand in front of her with whatever ancient script I remembered. Instead, I wrote, I am fine, which is possibly the biggest lie in the 10,000-year history of anything. Sarah looked at it for a moment, then she looked up. That's good, she said, very carefully, in the tone of someone who very much does not believe what they're hearing, but is choosing not to push. She was respectful about it. She let me have the lie. I liked her for that. I liked her for letting me have the lie on the very first conversation we'd ever had. That's a good instinct. The white-bearded man crouched down beside her and said something quiet. She listened, nodded, said something back. He sighed and stayed. The one who had been eating a snack had finished their snack and was now sitting on a rock at the edge of my sand, looking attentive. The camels remained profoundly unimpressed, but had elected not to leave, which from a camel I interpret as cautious endorsement. Seer smoothed the map on the sand in front of her and ran her finger along one of the lines. I watched that finger. I watched it closely. I need to ask you some questions, she said. If that's okay, if you want to. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to. She was giving me an out. She was establishing consent before asking me questions. She was treating me like someone with rights and preferences. I had not been treated like someone with rights and preferences in the entire 10,000 years of my existence. Not once, not remotely. I arranged the sand into 2 letters and tried to make them look as steady as I could manage given the circumstances. Okay. Siri nodded. She took a breath. She looked at the map once more and then looked up at me with the expression of someone beginning something important. The first thing I want to know, she said, is whether you're doing it on purpose. I understood immediately what she meant. She meant, is the dying intentional? Are you killing people on purpose? Is this what you want? Or is this something happening to you too? 12 years of studying me. And the first real question she asked, the one she apparently had to work up to, was that one. Not what are you, or how did you become this, or how old are you, or any of the 10,000 questions I'd have asked in her position. The first question was, are you okay? And the second question was, is the killing on purpose? She was asking about intent before anything else, before history or science or any of the practical questions. She cared about intent first. I cannot explain what that did to me. I cannot explain it in any language from any of the 40 civilizations inside me. No words exist. I rearranged the sand for a long time. I wrote it slowly, letter by letter, making sure it was right, making sure she could read it clearly. No. Then, it is never on purpose. Then, because that still didn't feel like enough, because 12 years of someone's life deserved more than 2 short sentences, I have been trying to be still for 10,000 years. I cannot always manage it. I am sorry. I am so very sorry for all of them. Siri read it, all of it, slowly and carefully. Then she did something I completely did not expect, had no framework for, had never experienced in 10,000 years of existing. She put her hand flat on the sand, on me, gently. Not testing, not probing, not performing a ritual, just placing her palm down flat, like you'd put your hand on someone's shoulder, like you'd touch someone's arm when you couldn't find the right words. I know, she said quietly. That's why we came. I need to tell you something about what it feels like to be touched by someone who means it. When you're sand, when you're a landscape. Normally when things touch me, it's weight, pressure, the mathematical fact of something resting on something else, just physics, just load-bearing. That's what every caravan was, every army, every pilgrim. Weight and movement and eventually, usually grief, just pressure, just physics. This was not that. This was a hand placed flat by a person who knew what I was and had chosen to touch me anyway, with intention, with care. I felt it across the entire surface of me, like the feeling had no size limit, like the warmth of that one palm spread everywhere at once. If I had had a voice, I probably would have made an extremely embarrassing sound. Fortunately, I do not have a voice and no one will ever know. I arranged the sand very carefully under her palm, just the grains right there, right beneath her hand, slow and gentle. Thank you. She felt it. I know because her hand pressed slightly down, slightly firmer for just a moment, like an answer. Like, you're welcome. The white-bearded man made a sound, not language exactly, the specific sound that means, I cannot believe what I am currently witnessing. One of the others, the curious one, the one who had been leaning forward, had stood up and walked closer. They were watching intently. Even the anxious one had stopped shifting weight and was just standing still, watching. Not running, not panicking, just watching. And the camel that had sat down appeared to have fallen asleep, which I found deeply endearing and also very appropriate for the moment. Sarah kept her hand exactly where it was. She looked at the old map again with her other hand, slowly tracing a line. Okay, she said. Second question. She was going to ask more questions. She had more questions. She had prepared questions. She had 12 years of questions, apparently. I arranged the sand into a shape that I hoped conveyed readiness and attention and maybe a little bit of desperate, shameful eagerness. It just spelled ready. 12 years of preparation. I managed one word. Very efficient. Second question, Sari said again, and this one is more complicated. I need to know, do you want to stop? Do you want to find a way to not hurt people anymore? Do I want to stop? Do I want to find a way to not hurt people anymore? Do I want... She was asking what I want. She was asking about my wants, as if they were real things that could be considered and accommodated and genuinely worked toward. I've spent 10,000 years trying to hold still. 10,000 years of grief and control and failure and more grief and more control. And she was asking, do you want to find a way to stop? Like there might be a way? Like that might be a thing that could happen. Like I had a choice. I wrote slowly. I wrote it the way you'd say something you've needed to say for a very long time and couldn't find anyone to say it to. More than anything. Then, I have wanted to stop for as long as I can remember. I have never known how. I have never known if it was possible. Then, are you telling me there is a way? Sari looked at the words for a long time. A long, long time. The white-bearded man leaned over and read them too. His expression changed. Not the I told you so expression anymore. something else, something that looked like it might be the thing that comes after skepticism breaks. Sierra looked up at that specific point again, that place where my eyes would be. She had clearly decided where my face was, and she stuck to it. I don't know if there's a way, she said honestly. I don't know yet, but I think there might be. And I think you'd have to help. I would have to help. To find a way to stop accidentally destroying things, I would have to help. I would have to help someone help me become something that didn't accidentally destroy things anymore. I arranged the sand into one word. The most important word I'd written in 10,000 years. The first truly voluntary word I'd ever said. Yes. Just that. Just yes. Yes, I will help. Yes, I want to find a way. Yes, this is worth trying. Yes to whatever this is. Yes to this strange young woman and her map. Yes to her 12 years of preparation. Yes to the man with the white beard who doesn't believe in me but came anyway. Yes to the snack person. Yes to the curious one and the anxious one. And yes, deeply yes, to the camel that fell asleep during first contact with an ancient desert consciousness. Yes? Sari nodded, and for the first time since she'd sat down, she smiled fully. Not the small, cautious smile from before, a real one, a whole one. Okay, she said. Then we have a lot to talk about. And we did. We had so much to talk about. But first, she reached into the bag she'd carried all this way and pulled out a small wrapped package and offered it to the person eating snacks. The snack person looked surprised. Then they took it and started eating it, completely calm, completely unbothered. I love that person so much. And the white-bearded man sat down next to Sari and pulled out his own map, older, more worn, different symbols, and spread it out too. And the curious one sat on the other side, and the anxious one sat too, still a little tense, but sitting. And even the remaining camels settled. 11 humans and 5 camels sitting at my edge in the late afternoon light, preparing to have a conversation with a desert. I arranged my sand into something that wasn't a word, just a shape, just a circle, smooth and clean, surrounding all of them gently. Not a trap, not a wall, just I don't know the word exactly. In no language I know from inside me is there quite the word for it. Something like, you are here, this is your place. While you are here, you are inside something that will try very hard not to hurt you. Something like, welcome. The white-bearded man looked at the circle and said something that wasn't in his warning voice anymore. Lower, quieter, different. Seer translated for me, speaking aloud what he'd said. He says, he didn't believe you were real. He spent 12 years helping me find you because he loves me, not because he believed. He says he's sorry. He spent 12 years helping her find me because he loves her, not because he believed I existed, just because he loves her. I wrote back slowly. I chose the words very carefully because I wanted them to be the right words. I didn't have a lot of experience with right words. Tell him, thank you for coming anyway. That is the harder kind of love. I know what it costs. Seer read it. Then she translated. The white-bearded man looked at the words for a long time. His jaw did the thing jaws do when someone is not going to cry and is being very firm about that decision. He said something short. Seer smiled. She looked up at me. He says he's starting to believe now. He's starting to believe now. 10,000 years, 40 civilizations, uncountable centuries of silence and loneliness and the particular grief of causing harm you never intended. And on this day, in this afternoon light, with these 11 people and 5 camels and 1 map and 1 very old man who came because he loves his person, someone was starting to believe in me. I don't have a word for what I felt. None of the 40 civilizations inside me gave me a word for it. It was enormous. It was quiet. It was the feeling of something that had been closed for a very long time beginning, just barely to open. I rearranged the sand inside the circle I had made. Just the sand inside the space where they were all sitting, gently, very gently, so that it was smooth and flat and soft under them, so that they would be comfortable, so that they could sit there for as long as they needed. It was the only thing I could think to do, the only real gift I had to give that I knew how to give without causing harm. They noticed. They looked around at the suddenly smooth sand. The anxious one reached down and touched it. Their expression changed. Siré looked up slowly and said, "Is that you?" Yes. I wrote it in the smoothed sand in small, careful letters right in front of her. Yes, it is comfortable. I wanted you to be comfortable. She looked at the words, and then she laughed. An actual real laugh, sudden and surprised and genuine. And that sound, that particular sound in that particular afternoon light, at the edge of me, from a real living person who had come to find me, I felt it everywhere. Across all 300 miles, down through all the layers, down to where Civilization 1 was, and 7, and 23. I felt it everywhere, and I felt it as the thing it was. The sound of something new beginning. The first sound of whatever came next. Whatever came next for a desert that had been alone and grieving for 10,000 years. Whatever came next for 11 humans and 5 camels who had traveled far enough and been brave enough to say hello. Whatever came next for a young woman who had spent 12 years finding me and had walked to my edge and put her hand in my sand and asked, first of all, not what I was or how I worked or what I was worth, but whether I was okay. That sound carried across all 300 miles of me, and everywhere it touched, something ancient and closed and cold felt a little less cold. And I thought, maybe. For the first time in 10,000 years, I thought, maybe. Drop a comment if you would have done what Sarah did. Drop a comment if you would have sat down. I want to know how many of you would have stayed. So there I was, a 10,000-year-old desert, having my first real conversation with 11 humans and 5 camels at sunset. If you had told me this morning that today would be the day everything changed, I would not have believed you. I don't have mornings exactly, but if I did, if I had mornings, if I woke up the way humans wake up, slow and confused and reaching for something familiar, this morning I would have woken up expecting exactly what every other morning had given me for 10,000 years. Nothing, just wind. Instead, I had Sarah, and her map, and her 12 years of notes, and the white-bearded man who came because he loves her, and 5 camels who had collectively decided to reserve judgment, which honestly is the most sensible position anyone has taken around me. Let me tell you what happened next. Because what happened next is the part I have been turning over in my mind ever since. Sarah smoothed out her map one more time. It was old. I could tell from the texture of it against my sand, the weight of the paper. She pointed to a line on it. A thick line running east to west across what I recognized from the shape was a map of me, of my body. This is the route most civilizations have tried, she said. Straight through, east to west, the shortest crossing. I looked at the line. I knew that route. I knew it intimately, and I knew it the way you know a scar, by where it hurts. That was Civilization 2's route, and 6's, and 14's, and 28's, and several others I had lost count of over the centuries. The straight line, the obvious line, the line that looked efficient on paper and was in practice a direct path through my deepest self, through the place where I dream the most, through the center of me where the old grief sits heaviest and the ground moves most often. Every group that took this route, Sarah said carefully, didn't make it. I wrote in the sand, I know, I am sorry. You don't have to keep apologizing, she said. I'm not here to assign blame, I'm here to understand. She is not here to assign blame. She is here to understand. I want you to think about what that means for a moment. Just sit with that. For 10,000 years, every person who thought about me at all thought about me as a threat, a danger, a problem to be solved or avoided. Not as something that might have reasons, not as something that might have a perspective worth understanding, just as an obstacle, just as death. And here was this woman saying clearly and directly, I'm not here to assign blame. I'm here to understand what you actually are. I didn't write anything for a long moment. I just existed, which is all I can do, but I did it differently for those few seconds. I did it like someone who had just heard something they didn't know they needed to hear, like someone remembering what it felt like to matter. Then Sarah pointed to a different part of the map, to the edges of me, to the north and south margins where I thin out into scrubland. I think the problem isn't you, she said. I think the problem is where they were walking. I wrote, explain. She leaned forward. And this is where I realized, this is where it really hit me, that she had thought about this, really thought about it. Not the way people thought about crossing me, which was logistics and supplies and prayers and hoping for the best. Real thought, deep thought. You move most in the center, she said. The big dunes, the deep sand, the places where the ground shifts, that's all central. True, I wrote, but at the edges, here and here, she pointed to the north and south margins of her map. The ground is more stable, more rock. True, I wrote again. The edges of me are older, harder. The deep sand stops and the ancient stone underneath starts to show through. I had never thought about this as meaningful before. To me, it was just geography, just the shape of what I am, just my body. If someone traveled along the edge instead of through the center, Sarah said, would that be safer? I thought about this. I thought about it carefully. This was not a question I had ever been asked before, and it deserved real consideration. The edges of me are where the scorpions live mostly. The rock lizards, the things small enough and light enough that my shifting doesn't matter. The edges of me are where the old archaeology shows, bits of old civilizations from before I became what I am, older than my memory. The edges are where I am thinnest, where I am most like regular desert and least like whatever it is I actually am deep in my center. I wrote slowly, possibly. The edges are older. They shift less, but they are longer. The route would take much more time. Seer nodded. like I had said something she already suspected. She made a mark on the map, just a small mark with whatever she was using to write. The white-bearded man, I still didn't know his name yet, I was going to ask, leaned over and looked at the mark. He said something short. Sarah translated. He says the longer route would require more supplies than most caravans carry. They'd have to resupply somewhere midway. I thought about this. Midway along my northern edge, there's a place where an underground spring comes close to the surface. Very close. Not close enough that anyone crossing through my center would ever know about it, but close enough at the edge that a person might find it. Civilization 7 had found it. The scholars. They'd camped there for 3 days, and I had felt their happiness about the water, the relief. They were the ones who taught me their language fragments. They sat at that spring for 3 days, and some of them read aloud, and I listened. I know where the spring is. I have always known. I've carried the knowledge of it the way I carry everything, permanently without use. Until now. I wrote, there is water at the northern edge, midway, an underground spring, civilization. 7 found it. They called it the quiet place. Sarah went completely still. She stared at the words. Then she looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen on a human face in centuries. That expression, you know it. It's the one where someone realizes that the thing they've been working toward for 12 years is actually real. The one where the hypothesis becomes fact, where the map becomes territory, where 12 years of being called obsessive suddenly feels worth it. You know about the spring, she said. Not a question, just saying it, processing it, confirming it was real. I have known about that spring for several thousand years, I wrote into the sand. No one ever asked me before, not once. Sarah laughed again. That laugh, I felt it the same way I felt the first one. Everywhere, all at once, warm and sudden and real. No one ever asked, she repeated. She was laughing, and also doing the face where something is so obvious in retrospect it becomes funny. The white-bearded man looked at me, at the words in the sand. He said something longer this time, something with more words than before. Siri listened. Then she looked at me. He wants to know, what else do you know? What else have you been carrying that no one asked about? What else do I know? What else have I been carrying that no one asked about? Oh, that is quite the question. That is possibly the most interesting question anyone has asked me in the entire history of my existence. I considered it for a moment, because the honest answer is, I know a tremendous amount of things. An embarrassing amount of things, actually. When 40 civilizations pass through you and become part of you, you absorb everything they were. Their knowledge, their maps, their stories. The scholars of Civilization 7 weren't the only ones who carried knowledge into me. They were just the only ones who actively shared it. Civilization 12 had architects. I know things about how to build structures that survive extreme heat that no living architect knows now. Civilization 19 had doctors, healers, people who understood the body in ways that were different from current medical understanding. Civilization 24 had astronomers, not just star watchers, people who had mapped the sky with instruments I felt them carrying. Their star charts are somewhere in me, their calculations, their careful observations of things that move slowly overhead while I lay still. I know things about underground water across this entire region because 12 civilizations dug for it at various points while crossing me. I know things about what this landscape was before I became what I am because the deeper layers of me predate my own consciousness. I know things. I've been lying here for 10,000 years knowing things, and no one ever thought to ask what I knew. No one ever thought to ask me anything. I wrote, I know where the water is. All of it. Under this entire region, every spring, every aquifer, every place where it runs close to surface. I wrote, I know where the dangerous places are too. The places where the ground is unstable, where the sand goes deep and stays soft forever. I wrote, I know which directions the wind changes and when. I have felt every wind pattern across this region for 10,000 years of mornings. I wrote, I know what the weather will do 3 days before it does it. I feel it, coming the way you feel a headache before it arrives. I wrote, I know where 12 different civilizations buried things they meant to come back for and never did. Their most important things. I wrote, food stores, maps, things made of material that does not decay, things they called sacred and wrapped carefully and put in the ground. I wrote, all of those things are still there. Still exactly where they were put, waiting for people who are never coming back to claim them. Sari had gone very still, the kind of still that a person goes when they are doing calculations in their head, and the numbers keep getting larger. Oren had looked up from his book. He was staring at the sand words with an expression I can only describe as scholarly devastation. The young one with the notebook, who had been writing steadily this whole time, had stopped writing. Just stopped. Pen held in the air. The snack person had put down whatever they were preparing and was listening with the focused attention of someone who understood the implications. Because here was the implication: I was an archive. I had always been an archive. I contained thousands of years of accumulated human knowledge. Not because I sought it out, not because I chose to collect it, just because things passed through me and became part of me and stayed. I was a library that no one had ever thought to read, a record that no one had ever thought to access, a witness to 10,000 years of history. And for the first time in all of that time, across all 10,000 years of my existence, someone was actually writing it down. The young one with the notebook resumed writing, urgently now, with the specific speed of someone who knows they cannot write fast enough. I wrote, "Also, I know every language, fragment from every civilization that passed through me, parts of 40 different languages." I wrote, "Most of those languages no longer exist anywhere else. I am the last place they exist, inside me, in the deep layers." The pen stopped again. The young one looked up at Sarah with an expression of complete overwhelm. Sarah looked back with the same expression. Oren closed his book. He put it down beside him on the sand. He folded his hands and looked at the words I had written and stayed very quiet. After a long moment, he spoke. Sarah translated, and her voice was slightly unsteady. He says, "We are going to need a much bigger notebook." I felt something warm move through me at that. Something that was half amusement and half relief and half something I didn't have a name for. "Yes," I wrote slowly, with something that felt like warm amusement in every grain. "I think you're almost certainly right about that." I wrote, "I know where the ruins are, the old ones before me. Things that civilizations have been looking for and passing over for centuries." I wrote, "I know which plants grow at my edges and what they can be used for. Civilization. 19's healers used several of them." I wrote, "I know the safe paths, not just the northern edge. There are 7 routes across me that are significantly safer than the straight line. 7 routes. I had known about all 7 routes for thousands of years. 7 routes that would have let people cross me without dying. And no one asked. For 10,000 years, they just kept walking the straight line through my heart, and I kept accidentally destroying them. I don't know which of those things affected Sarah the most, but I know which one hit the white-bearded man because I could feel him stand up. He stood up, which disturbed the sand slightly, and he walked to the edge of the circle I had made, and he stood there for a moment. Then he turned back to Sarah and said something. And his voice was different now, not warning, not skeptical, something I would call shaken. Siri translated quietly. He says, 7 routes. There have always been 7 safe routes, and every civilization that died here died on the one that wasn't safe. Yes, exactly. That is exactly what I had been trying not to think about for 400 years. All of them chose the one route, always. Because it looked shortest on a map. Because efficiency matters when you're carrying supplies and your feet hurt and you want to get there. Because no one thought to ask the desert which way was safe. Because it never occurred to anyone that the desert might have preferences. I had preferences. I had always had preferences. I preferred when people didn't walk through my center because my center is where I dream. I preferred the northern route, the one along the old stone, the one civilization 7 took partly before they settled at the spring. If anyone had asked, if a single person in 10,000 years had stopped at my edge and said, which way is safe, I could have told them. I wrote this, slowly, because it needed to be said, and I had been not saying it for longer than most human civilizations have existed. I wrote, if anyone had asked me which way was safe, I would have told them. I have always known. I could never find a way to tell anyone. The silence after that was a particular kind of silence, the kind that happens when something true is said that no one knew was true until now. Sere sat with it. The white-bearded man sat back down. The others? I noticed now they had all come closer during this, quietly, without announcement. They were all sitting within my circle now, all 11 of them. Even the anxious one had stopped fidgeting and was just listening. The snack person had finished their second snack and was now watching with the particular focus of someone who has realized this matters. One of them, a young man I thought, from his weight and the way he sat, had pulled out a notebook and was writing things down, writing down what I was writing, copying my sand words into paper words to take somewhere, to keep, to not lose when I smoothed the sand over. That hit me differently than I expected. Someone was writing down what I said. Someone thought what I said was worth writing down and keeping. Siri looked up at me. She was doing the thing where she was about to say something important and she was choosing the words carefully first. I want to ask you something personal, she said. You don't have to answer, but I want to ask. I arranged the sand. Ask. She took a breath. The 40 civilizations, the ones inside you, do you know, is there any way to know if any part of them is still there? There it is. The question I had been carrying for longer than she had been alive. The question I asked myself in every empty century. I stayed still for a moment, because this deserved stillness. This deserved the respect of not rushing toward an answer I wasn't sure about. I wrote carefully, I don't know for certain, but I feel something. From certain directions, certain depths, something that feels like memory. Then, not voices, not thoughts, more like the feeling of music when you can't quite hear the song anymore, but just the feeling of it. Then, I hope they are at peace. I hope that more than anything else I have ever hoped, even more than I hope to stop hurting people. Seer read it all. She was quiet for a long time. If we find a way to help you, she said finally, to help you have more control, to help you not move when you don't mean to. She paused. Do you think that would affect them, the ones inside you? I had not considered this. I genuinely had not considered this specific question, and the considering of it was interesting and also frightening. If the movement was what kept them dissolved, if my shifting and breathing and dreaming was what kept them from cohering into something more, would stillness change them? Would real stillness, intentional stillness, the kind I could never manage before, would that do something? I wrote, I don't know. That is an honest answer. I genuinely do not know what would happen to them if I became more still. Then, but I think they would want me to try. If any part of them is there, if any part of civilization, one is still in me somewhere, then I think they would want me to stop adding to their number. I think that is what they would choose, if they could choose. Sari nodded. Something about her face had changed over the course of this conversation. She had come here with a hypothesis and notes. She was leaving, or staying for now, but eventually leaving, with something different, something heavier and more important than notes. She had come here treating me as a subject of study. She was staying and treating me as something else. I didn't have a word for it exactly. The closest I could get from the languages inside me was the word in Civilization 7 used for the relationship between a student and a teacher. Except I wasn't sure which of us was which in that relationship. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe it was something that didn't have a word yet. The white-bearded man spoke, longer this time. A real speech, not a warning or a single comment. He spoke for almost a full minute. Sari listened and then translated. He says his name is Oren. He says he has been a scholar of desert regions for 40 years. I wrote, I thought he looked like someone who had been in charge too long. Scholars and leaders have the same posture after a while. Sari translated this. Oren made a sound that I believe was a laugh, though it was short and seemed slightly against his will, a reluctant laugh. He says he spent 30 of those 40 years arguing that this desert couldn't be alive, that the stories were folklore, exaggeration. I wrote, he is not wrong to have thought that. It is the rational position. I am not a rational thing to exist. He says, Siri continued, that he would like, if you are willing, to ask you some questions from his scholarship, things he has wondered. A 40-year scholar of desert regions wanted to ask me questions. A man who spent his career studying the thing wanted to talk to me. I wrote, tell Oren I would like that very much. I have been waiting a long time for someone to ask me questions worth answering. Oren heard the translation and sat up a little straighter. He opened his own bag and pulled out a book, thick, well used, full of marked pages. He found a page. He cleared his throat, and I realized, watching him prepare his first question like a man performing something sacred, I realized that this was his equivalent of what I had been waiting for. He had questions that had nowhere to go for 40 years. Nowhere. He had spent 40 years accumulating questions about a thing no one believed was real enough to answer them. And now here he was. We were, in some strange way, equally relieved to have found each other. A desert and a scholar, both of us carrying things too long. Oren's first question, translated by Sari, asked in his careful, precise scholar's voice, was this: the deep erosion patterns in the central region, the ones that run counter to the prevailing wind direction. What caused them? Oh, that is a good question. That is the kind of question that tells you immediately you are talking to someone who actually paid attention. Those erosion patterns. I knew exactly what caused them. I had been there when they formed. I had been the thing they formed in, technically. I wrote, approximately 4,000 years ago, before my current shape. I was different then. Larger in the east, different geometry. I wrote, I rolled. That is the best word I have for it. I turned over in my sleep. The way a person rolls over in bed during a dream. I wrote, the wind patterns. At the time were southeast. When I rolled, my new surface had ridges from the roll direction, northwest. I wrote, the wind changed to match my new surface eventually. But the old patterns stayed, like stretch marks, like memory in the stone. Oren was writing furiously, not copying my words. He was writing his own words, his own analysis in the margins of his book. Fast. The kind of writing that happens when someone has been waiting for an answer for a very long time and needs to get the implications down quickly. He asked another question without looking up from his writing. Siri translated, "The glass deposits in the northern quadrant. Their origin?" I wrote, "Lightning. Approximately 6,000 years ago, there was a storm that lasted what I believe was close to a full year." I wrote, "Not continuous lightning, recurring, same location. I do not know why the storm targeted that spot. It simply did, repeatedly." I wrote, "The sand there is very fine and very old, and the lightning found it again and again until the glass was thick enough to notice." I wrote, "The glass has things in it from before my time. Small things, shells, bones of creatures I don't recognize from any civilization." I wrote, "I think this place was underwater once, before any of this, before the desert, before whatever I was before the desert." This stopped Oren's writing completely. He looked up, he stared at the words. He said something very short and very quiet in his language. Sarah translated with a small smile. He says, "Before the desert. That would predate every geological survey we have of this region." I wrote, "Yes. I believe what I am now is not what this place has always been. I am a recent development in the longer history of this ground." Then, by recent I mean the last 20,000 years or so. Geology is relative. Oren made the reluctant laugh sound again. It was becoming slightly less reluctant each time. That felt like progress. The questioning went on. One question, then another, each one precise and specific and coming from decades of accumulated wondering. I answered each one, slowly, carefully, writing it all in the sand while the young person with the notebook copied everything down faithfully. At some point, I was not paying close attention to time. Time moves differently for me. The light changed. The sun was getting lower. The shadows cast by my dunes grew long, and the color of my sand shifted from gold to deep orange to something close to red at the edges. And this is my favorite time. Dusk. When the temperature drops and the light goes long and everything becomes a different version of itself. I am different at dusk, quieter somehow. The parts of me that are most restless during the day settle a little in the cooling air. Sierra noticed the light changing. She looked around at the long shadows and then up at the sky and then at me, at that specific point. "We should make camp," she said. "If you don't mind, we'd like to stay tonight. Talk more tomorrow. If you'd prefer we leave, we can." If I'd prefer they leave. She was asking permission to stay on my land. In me, to make camp inside my body, essentially, and sleep there and be safe. She was asking permission. I wrote, "Please stay." Then, because that came out faster than I intended and might have seemed desperate, which it was, I added, "It is safe here, in this area. I will be careful tonight. I will try very hard not to move." Seer smiled. "You don't have to try that hard. You don't have to exhaust yourself. We've camped in deserts before." I wrote, "You have not camped in this desert before. This desert is me. I will be careful." She looked at the words for a moment, then, "Okay, thank you." The group began the practical business of making camp, setting up shelters, unpacking the camels, starting a fire, the ordinary human work of existing. I watched it all. I watched it the way I had watched every other group that had ever camped at my edge, at a distance, through sand. But this time was different. This time they knew I was watching. This time that was fine. This time watching was something we were both doing. The fire they built was small, efficient, the kind of fire made by experienced travelers who know exactly how much fire they need and no more. I felt its warmth on my surface as a small local heat. Not unpleasant, not alarming, just warmth. A small point of life against the cooling night. Oren sat close to it with his book and continued writing. The scholar at work. Still processing, still annotating, still catching up with himself. The young one with the notebook sat nearby, and they exchanged quiet words sometimes, comparing notes, I think, checking what they had each captured. The snack person, I had decided I was going to find out that person's name because they were clearly important, prepared food for the group. Not snacks this time. Real food. Cooked food. The smell of it reached my surface, and I recognized it as belonging to a category. Warmth. Home. The smell that means someone is making something for other people because other people matter to them. I know that smell. I know it from inside me. From Civilization 9, who had cooks, real dedicated cooks, who made food for their whole caravan every night. They're in me too. Civilization 9's cooks, whatever they were. Chemistry now, mostly. They're still down there. Still part of my substrate. I wondered if they could smell the food. I wondered if chemistry can have impressions of things it used to know. I hoped so. I really hoped so. Saray ate, and then came back and sat in the same spot. Her spot. I was already thinking of it as the place in my circle where she always sat. The fire was behind her, so I could see her clearly against the light. Dark hair, tired face. The good kind of tired. The earned kind. The kind of tired that comes from a long day of doing something that mattered. Not the tired of wasted time, the tired of used time. She sat for a moment, just being still, looking at the sky, which was doing its evening thing, stars appearing one by one as the last light faded. I love the stars. I have always loved the stars. They are the one thing that has been consistent across my entire existence. They are always there. Civilization 24's astronomers, they're in me somewhere. And I think about them when I watch the stars. I think, they knew these. They knew these exact stars. They calculated their movements and wrote them down and carried those calculations into me, and now I have them. Their star knowledge and my star watching, together for thousands of years, just the stars and the memory of people who loved them. Sari looked back down from the sky and found the point she had decided was my face and said quietly, "What are you thinking about?" What am I thinking about? A person was asking me what I was thinking about. In a quiet voice, at dusk, by a small fire, like we were friends, like I was someone whose thoughts were worth asking about, like the answer would be interesting, like she actually wanted to know. I wrote slowly in the sand in front of her. Small letters, intimate letters, the kind you use when the conversation is just between two people. I wrote, the stars and the people inside me who map them, and whether they can still somehow experience what I experience. I wrote, I think about them a lot, especially at dusk, especially when the first stars appear. I think they knew these ones too. Sari looked at the words for a long time, then she looked up at the stars for a moment, then back down at me. That's beautiful, she said simply. And very sad. Yes, I wrote. Both. I have found that most true things are both at the same time. She smiled at that. That's true. A comfortable silence settled. Not the silence of emptiness. I know that silence. I lived in it for centuries. But the silence of company. The silence that happens when two things are near each other and neither feels the need to fill the space between them with noise. I had not experienced that kind of silence in 10,000 years, possibly ever. I had only ever experienced the silence of being alone. This was different. This was the silence of not being alone, but not needing to perform not being alone. Just being near someone, just that. After a while, Sari said, "Can I ask you something? About what you want, about what you're hoping for, if we find a way to help you?" I wrote, "Yes." "What would you do?" she asked. "If you had control, real control, if you could hold still when you needed to, what would you do with that?" What would I do? With control, with the ability to choose stillness instead of accidentally failing at it every time I tried. I thought about this for a long time. The fire crackled. Oren turned a page. The camels made quiet camel sounds at each other in the dark. I thought about it, and I tried to be honest. Not about what sounded good or what the correct answer was. Just honest. Just what I actually wanted. I wrote, the first thing I would do is make a safe crossing, mark it, teach people where to walk. I wrote, I would mark the northern route with something permanent. Stone formations, patterns they could follow, so no one had to guess. I wrote, I would tell people where the water is, all 7 of the safe routes, all the springs, everything I know about how to cross me safely. I wrote, I want people to be able to cross. I have always wanted that. I have never wanted to be an obstacle. I just didn't know how to not be one. Then I paused. Because there was more. There was something else. Something I had been even more careful about not thinking about for centuries. Something that felt more vulnerable than water locations or safe routes. Something more personal than any of the geographical information. I wrote, and I think, after all of that, I would like, if it is possible, to not be alone anymore. I stopped. That was embarrassingly direct. I tried to think of whether I could add something to make it less direct, but nothing came. I just left it there. I would like to not be alone anymore. In the sand, at dusk, in front of a woman who had studied me for 12 years. Sari read it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I don't think that's too much to want. I think that's actually a very reasonable thing to want. Reasonable. She called, wanting to not be alone anymore after 10,000 years reasonable. I felt the words settle into me like water into dry sand. I think, Sari continued, that's actually what I came here hoping to offer. Not just a solution to the crossing problem, something more than that. I wrote, what do you mean? She thought for a moment. I've been studying you for 12 years. Do you know what most people thought of that? My colleagues, my teachers? I could guess. I had absorbed enough of human social dynamics from 40 civilizations to have a reasonable model of how humans treat unusual ideas. I wrote, they thought you were wasting your time, possibly losing your mind, studying something that couldn't be real. Yes, she said simply. Exactly that. And Oren, he came with me because he loves me and he thought it was a lost cause worth supporting. I looked toward Oren, who was still writing in his book, slightly hunched over, absorbed in his own scholarship. He didn't know we were discussing him. I wrote, "He is a good man. The ones who show up for something they don't believe and because someone they love believes in it are the best kind." Seer smiled. "I'll tell him you said that. He'll hate it and secretly appreciate it." She paused. "The reason I'm telling you this is..." She looked at the point she decided was my face, directly at it, the way she had from the beginning, unwavering. "We're not going anywhere. Not tonight, not after tonight. We came here to stay, to figure this out properly, however long it takes." "However long it takes," I wrote. "How long are you prepared for it to take?" "As long as it needs to," she said. I didn't spend 12 years preparing for a single conversation. I stayed very still with that for a moment. Not the involuntary stillness of trying not to dream. The voluntary stillness of processing something enormous. She had come to stay. Not to cross me and leave, not to take information and go. To stay, to figure out, however long. I wrote, "I should tell you something." She waited. I wrote, "In 10,000 years, no one has stayed. Everyone who came either crossed me or died trying or turned back." I wrote, "No one has ever chosen to stay at my edge and simply be present. You understand what I am telling you? No one, not once, ever." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She looked at her hands, then she looked back up at me. "I know," she said. "That is exactly why we came." Something in my deep layers shifted. Not the dangerous movement, not the kind that buries things. Something much smaller and much deeper. The kind of shift that happens when something that has been braced against pressure for a very long time realizes the pressure has eased, like a slow exhale, like unclenching something you didn't know you were clenching, like putting down a weight you'd carried so long it became invisible, like being seen, actually seen, by someone who came specifically for that purpose and brought 12 years of preparation, and an old man who loves her. I wrote, "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for answering," she said. The night deepened. The stars moved overhead in their slow, ancient circles. The fire in the camp burned low and then lower and then to coals. One by one, the humans lay down to sleep. The anxious one last, I noticed. They sat up for a while watching. Then they too lay down. Oren slept with his book clutched to his chest, which I found very endearing. A scholar sleeping with his scholarship. That's love, actually. The snack person, whose name I still didn't know, fell asleep immediately and with great conviction, the way someone sleeps who is at peace. Sarai was the last one awake. She sat in her spot for a long time after everyone else was down, just being present, being at the edge of me, and I was careful. The most careful I had been in thousands of years. I watched my own depths. I felt for the thing that becomes dreaming. Anytime I felt myself starting to drift toward something deeper than wakefulness, I redirected, pulled back, stayed near the surface of myself. It was work. Real work. The kind of work that I had always done in isolation and always eventually failed at because there was no reason to succeed. Now there was a reason. Now there were 11 humans and 5 camels sleeping in my circle, and I had promised to be careful, and I meant it. I held myself at the surface all night, all of the night, every star turn of it. I stayed awake and watchful and careful. And nothing happened. No storm, no shift, no buried things. Just a night passing as a night should pass, quietly, with sleeping things safe in it. As the sky began to lighten, at first gray before the actual dawn when the stars start to thin at the horizon, Sarai stirred. She opened her eyes and looked up at the fading stars, and then turned and looked at the point she always looked at. "Did you sleep?" she asked. I wrote in the pre-dawn gray, "No." I watched. "I wanted to make sure you were safe." She looked at the words for a moment. "You stayed up all night watching over us." "It was not difficult," I wrote, which was a lie. It was the hardest thing I had done in a long time, but some things you don't say. Some things you carry quietly. She had spent 12 years preparing to find me. The least I could do was stay awake. "Thank you," she said softly. "The stars were good company," I wrote. Siri smiled. She wrapped her traveling blanket tighter against the pre-dawn chill and looked at the horizon where the light was building. "Today," she said, "I want to try something. An experiment, if you're willing." I wrote, "I am willing." "I want to see if we can find the edge of your awareness," she said. "How far does your consciousness extend? Where does you become not you? How far does my consciousness extend? And where does me become not me?" These were not questions I had ever tried to answer with any precision. I had never tried to map this. I had always just known it implicitly, the way you know the edges of your own body. But mapping it deliberately? I wrote, "I have never tried to find my own edges deliberately. I simply know them the way you know where your hand ends. It is just known. She nodded. But could you try? Try to follow the edge of yourself north? Tell me where you stop feeling like you? This was interesting. This was a strange and interesting request, and I had no idea whether I could do it or what I would find if I tried. I wrote, I will try. Give me a moment. I focused, turned my attention northward, followed the edge of my awareness the way you'd trace a wall in the dark with your hands. The center of me was obvious, the deep sand, the dreaming places, the heavy old grief-soaked heart of what I am. That was clearly me. Moving north, the feeling changed. More rock, more stone, more ancient things that predate my consciousness by geological epochs. I was less dense there, less present, more like a film over something older rather than a deep thing in itself. Further north still, where scrubland began and the sand truly thinned, I could feel myself becoming uncertain, fading, like music getting quieter. And then, around what I estimated was roughly 30 miles north of my defined edge, I stopped. Or something stopped. The clear sense of me stopped. It wasn't absence. There was still sand there, still land. But it wasn't me the way my center was me. It was more like the edge of a word, like the sound a word makes as it ends and silence begins. Not quite the word anymore. Not quite silence yet. Something between. I wrote, 30 miles north of my defined edge. That is where I become uncertain, where the feeling of me becomes something less clear. I wrote, it is not a sharp line, it is gradual, like the way a sound fades. At some point it is sound, and then at some point it is not. I wrote, I'm not sure I had ever thought carefully about where I end before. This is an interesting question. Sarah was writing something down herself now. In a smaller notebook than Oren's, more worn, clearly the one she carried everywhere. What about south? She asked, still not looking up from her notebook, pen moving steadily across the page. Tell me where you end. I focused southward, different there. The southern edge of me was sharper. The land changed more abruptly going south. More dramatic geography. There was a ridge, about 20 miles south of my defined edge. Old stone, very old. And I stopped at that ridge precisely, like a wall. I wrote, south is different. I stop at a ridge, clearly, sharply, like a door. One side is me, the other side is not. I wrote, I don't know why the edges are different. North fades, south stops, east and west. I would have to check. I have never checked. Check, Sari said simply, still writing. I checked east and west. This took longer. Longer because east and west are where I am most stretched, most spread, most fully what I am. East was slow fading like north, but much further out. I traced it for what felt like a long time and found the fade began around 50 miles. West was strange. West, I had an irregular edge. Parts of me extended further west than others, like fingers reaching, like I had grown unevenly. I wrote, east fades around 50 miles past my defined edge. West is irregular. I've never noticed this before. I wrote, west I have what I can only describe as fingers, extensions, places where I reach further than elsewhere, uneven. I wrote, I do not know what caused this. I would have to think about it. Something happened in the west, something long ago. Siri looked up from her notebook with an expression that was entirely focused and entirely alive, the expression of someone on the edge of a discovery. The western extensions, she said slowly, do any of them correspond to the locations of old ruins, the ones you mentioned yesterday? I thought about this. I traced the western fingers and at the same time traced my knowledge of the old ruins, the pre-me archaeology. And then I felt it. What she was pointing at. What she had already suspected before I had thought to check. The western. Extensions and the ruins were in the same places. Every major extension west, every finger, corresponded to an old ruin site. I wrote, yes. I just wrote that one word first because it needed to be said immediately while I was still processing what it meant. Then, every western extension corresponds to an old ruin location. This is, I do not have a word for what this is. Siri finished the line she was writing, capped her pen, and looked up at me with both eyebrows raised and her head tilted slightly. I think, she said carefully, that you might be growing toward them, toward the ruins. I think you might be drawn to them somehow. Drawn to them, reaching toward old things, extending myself toward the places where old history sat preserved under the surface. I wrote, that would mean I have been moving, slowly, over thousands of years toward the ruins, without knowing I was doing it. Seer nodded slowly. Yes, that's what it would mean. I wrote, everything I do, without knowing I am doing it. My whole existence has been things happening to me that I didn't choose. I wrote, or things I chose and then failed to control. There is no third option. There has never been a third option. Siri put down her notebook. She looked at me. Really looked in the way she had from the very beginning, like she was seeing all the way down. That's what we're here to find, she said quietly. The third option. I held very still with that sentence. The third option. The thing between happening without choosing and choosing without controlling. Something in between, something with more agency. The sun was fully up now. The camp was waking. Oren was already sitting up, book in hand. The others were stirring. The snack person was already making something, already being useful, already contributing, already being whoever they were, steadily in the morning. I decided then I was going to find out their name today. That was my goal for the day. Everything else was important, but that felt necessary. I had 40 civilizations inside me, and not one of them had anyone who reminded me of the snack person. That presence, that calm. I wanted to know the name. Siri stretched and stood and looked around at the morning, and then looked at me one more time before going to help with the camp's breakfast. Good morning, she said, like it was a thing she would say every morning, like this was already a daily thing between us. Good morning. Good morning, I wrote. I wrote it in large letters, actually. Letters big enough that Oren could see them from where he sat. He looked at them. He looked at Sarah. He said something. Siri laughed. She translated for me. He says it's deeply unnerving that the desert says good morning and he's going to need more time. I wrote large enough for Oren. Tell Oren he has as much time as he needs. I have been here for 10,000 years. I am in no rush. Oren read it. He made the reluctant laugh sound, a longer one this time, significantly less reluctant than yesterday's versions. And I thought, there it is, day 2. And the man who didn't believe in me is starting to laugh at things I write in the sand. That is progress. That is what progress looks like in real life. Not dramatic, not instant, not a revelation with music. Just an old scholar laughing at a joke made by a desert. Just that. Just the quiet, ordinary miracle of two unexpected things finding each other. I felt, in the slow, warming morning air, something I hadn't felt in 10,000 years of sunrises. I felt like today was going to be a good day. Drop a comment telling me what question you'd ask a living desert if you got the chance. I want to know what's been building up in you. Day 3, which sounds like nothing. Day 3 out of 10,000 years of days. But it was already the best 3 days of my entire existence. I want to be clear about that. 3 days of being talked to, of being asked questions, of having someone say good morning to me every dawn. 3 days, and I was already a completely different thing than I had been before they arrived. Not physically, not in my sand or my stones, and whatever it is that counts as my interior, in the part of me that feels things, in the part that had spent 10 millennia waiting for this. On the morning of day 3, before the camp was fully awake, before even Oren had opened his book, something happened that I had not expected. The anxious one came to sit in Sarah's spot, alone. Before Sarah was up, just sat down in the circle I had made and looked at the sand. I had been watching them for 3 days. Of all the group, the anxious one worried me most in the gentle way that something precious worries you, the way you worry about a bird with a healing wing, not from fear of it, but from care for it. This person carried something heavy. I could feel it. Heavy things have weight, and weight presses on me in ways I feel distinctly. Most weight is just logistics. This weight was something else. This was the weight of someone who had come a very long way carrying something they had not yet put down. Emotional weight, the hardest kind. I waited. I stayed still and attentive and patient, the way I had learned to be patient across 10,000 years of having nothing else to do. After a long moment, the anxious one looked at the sand in front of them. Then they looked up at the place everyone had decided was my face. And they said, in a voice much quieter than their usual anxious voice, "Is it okay if I talk to you? Just me. Just for a minute. Just me. Just for a minute." I rearranged the sand very gently in front of them. Small letters. Calm letters. The kind of letters that say, "There's no rush here. Yes, I have time." The anxious one let out a long, slow breath. The kind held down inside for years, finally given permission to leave. "I didn't want to come on this trip," they said. "I want you to know that. I thought Sarah was wrong. About you, about all of it." I wrote, "That is understandable. I am not an obvious thing to believe in." Then they said, "I'm a practical person. I deal in things I can verify, things I can measure, things that make complete sense when I write them down in my own words." I wrote, "And yet here you are." "And yet here I am," they agreed. They looked down at the letters for a moment. "My name is Devon. I haven't told you that yet." Devon. The anxious one had a name, and the name was Devon. And now I would know them as Devon, and not as the anxious one forever. I wrote, "I am glad you told me. I have been wanting to know your name for 2 days." Devon looked surprised. Why? I wrote, because you seemed important, and important things should have names attached to them. Devon was quiet for a moment, then, that's a strange thing to say. I wrote, I am a strange thing to exist. We are well matched in that regard. Devon almost smiled. Almost. Not quite. There was still something in the way. Still the heavy thing pressing down. I waited. I had learned in 3 days that Sarai would always get to the point quickly and Oren would build to it carefully. But Devon was someone who needed to arrive at the point by walking around it first, by checking the perimeter, by making sure it was safe. I understood that. I had spent 10,000 years checking perimeters. I understood that approach from the inside. After another long pause, Devon said, I lost someone a few years ago. Someone who was trying to cross this desert. Oh. I held absolutely, completely still. Not the forced stillness of trying not to dream. The stillness of someone who has just understood something very important and needs a moment. Devon continued quietly. They were part of a trading caravan. They knew the risks. Everybody knew the risks. But they went anyway because they stopped. Started again. Because they thought they could make it. Because the route seemed manageable. Because they had good supplies. I knew exactly which caravan they meant. I could feel the direction Devon was facing, and I knew, from the direction, which caravan they meant. There was a caravan, roughly 4 years ago. 37 people. They had taken the straight route, the central route. Of course they had. I remembered them the way I remember all the others. Not as faces. I don't perceive faces exactly, but as weight and warmth and then absence. They had made it 11 days. 11 days, which is further than most. They were good travelers. Prepared, careful, genuinely skilled. And then I had dreamed, just a small dream, just a fragment. And 11 days of careful travel had become nothing in the space of that fragment. I carry them now, all 37. They're in me the way everyone is in me. Chemistry, depth, the quiet presence of people I didn't mean to keep. I wrote very slowly, each word deliberate, each word chosen with the full weight of 10,000 years of accumulated regret behind it. I know the caravan you mean. I carry them, all of them. I am sorry, I am sorry. In a way that has no adequate expression in any language. Devon was very still now, reading the words, reading them again. I wrote, they traveled well. 11 days, further than most. They were skilled and careful, and it did not matter, and that is my fault. I wrote, I dreamed. That is all it was, a small dream. And 37, skilled and careful people stopped being people because of it. I wrote, I have known this for 4 years. I have been carrying both the weight of them and the weight of what I did to them every day since. Devon's breathing had changed. The kind of breathing that happens when something you have been bracing against has finally been said out loud. They didn't suffer, Devon said. It wasn't a question. It was something they had been needing to say for 4 years. Saying it now. I wrote, it was fast. That is true, and it is not enough, and I know that. But it is true. I would not lie to you about this. Devon put their face in their hands. Not crying exactly. Something quieter than crying. Something more exhausted than crying. Just processing. I stayed still. I let the silence be what it needed to be. I have learned that silence has purposes, and interrupting it too soon is unkind. After a while, Devon lowered their hands and looked at the sand word still sitting there. 4 years of being careful around this, and here it was. Why did you say yes? Devon asked. When Sarah asked if you wanted to stop, you didn't hesitate. You just said yes immediately. I wrote, because I have wanted to stop for as long as I can remember. Because every time it happens, I carry it forever. I wrote, I do not get to put them down. They become part of me whether I want that or not. Every person I have ever accidentally harmed is still here. I wrote, I carry your person too. Devon, whoever they were, they are in me now, and they will be in me for as long as I exist, which may be a very long time. Devon was quiet for a long time, long enough that the sun moved, long enough that I heard the camp beginning to stir behind them. Finally, Devon said, is that comfort, that they're still somewhere, even if it's just chemistry inside a desert? I thought about this, really thought about it, because it deserved real thought and not a quick reassurance that felt good but wasn't true. I wrote, I don't know if it is comfort. That is an honest answer. I genuinely do not know what they experience now, or if they experience anything. I wrote, what I can tell you is that they are not lost. They are somewhere. They are part of something that will persist for a very long time. I wrote, and if any part of them can still perceive anything, I think they feel the same things I feel when I feel them. Which is, they are known. I wrote, they are known to me. I know they were here. I know they traveled well. I know they mattered. I will know this forever. Devon read all of it, every word. Their breathing had steadied into something more regular, something less braced. "Thank you," they said finally, "for telling me that." I wrote, "Thank you for asking. No one has ever asked me about the people inside me before. You are the first person to ask about specific ones." Devon looked at that. Something in their face changed very slightly, shifted toward something that wasn't quite peace, but was pointing in that direction. "I came on this trip," Devon said quietly, "because Sarai asked me, and I can never say no to Sarai. That's still true. I want to be honest." I wrote, "I appreciate the honesty. It is rarer than people think." "But I'm glad I came," Devon said. And then, after a pause, "I think they would have wanted me to come. I think they would have wanted this." I wrote, "I think so too, based on how they traveled, the care they took. They were the kind of people who would have wanted this very much." Davin stood up, brushed sand off their clothes in the practical way of someone who has decided something and is ready to act on the decision. "I have questions too," Devon said. "Practical ones. About the safe routes. About how to actually build the system you're describing." I wrote, "I am ready for practical questions. Practical questions are very welcome." Devon almost smiled again, this time closer to actual. "After breakfast," they said. "I think better after breakfast." I wrote, "I have been told that is a common human experience." This time Devon actually laughed, short and surprised and genuine, the first laugh I had heard from them in 3 days of watching them carefully. And I thought, there it is. There is the person underneath the anxious one. There is Davin when the weight lifts just slightly. I like this person. I carry their person. 4 years ago, their person walked into me and became part of me, and I have felt the particular quality of them ever since. And now here was Davin, laughing at something I wrote, getting up to make breakfast, preparing practical questions about safe routes. It felt like something closing and something opening at the same time, the kind of both that only happens when something is genuinely true. By the time Sarai woke up and came to her spot and said good morning, the whole dynamic of the camp had shifted in a way I could feel through the ground. Devon was moving differently, still practical, still precise, but lighter, the specific lightness of someone who has put something down after carrying it too long. "Good morning, Seer," I wrote before she even spoke. She looked at the words and smiled, and I felt that the same way I always felt her smiling. "Good morning," she said. "You seem..." She paused, trying to find the word. "Alert. More alert than usual." I wrote, "I had a conversation with Devon this morning, before you woke. I hope that was all right." Sarah looked over at Devon, who was preparing breakfast with the focused purposefulness of someone who has made a decision. She nodded slowly. "I'm glad," she said simply. And then, "Today I want to try the experiment I mentioned, about your control. Are you ready for that? The control experiment." She had mentioned wanting to try something. I had been thinking about it since she first said it 2 days ago. I wrote, "I have been thinking about it. I should tell you, I have tried to control my movements deliberately before. It has not gone well." Siri nodded. "I know, but you were trying alone. I think that's the difference. I want to try together." Together. She wanted to try it together, as if my controlling myself was something that could be collaborative, as if I didn't have to do it alone. I had always done everything alone. For 10,000 years. Every attempt at stillness, every effort at control, every failure, alone. The idea that it could be different, that someone could be there, present, actively helping, actually in it with me instead of just on the outside. I wrote, "I am willing to try. I want to be honest. I am also afraid. If I lose control with you here, it would be worse than losing it alone." Seer read this. She didn't flinch. She didn't reassure me with a quick, "It'll be fine," which would have felt dismissive and untrue. She said, "I know that's the risk. We've thought about it. We're not going to be in the center. We'll be here, at the edge, the stable part." I wrote, "And if I lose control, even at the edge?" "Then we move fast," she said steadily. "We've planned for that. Devon has the evacuation route mapped. Oren has the signal system ready." They had planned. They had sat together, these 11 people and their 5 camels, and planned for what to do if I failed, if I hurt them. They had planned for my failure, and they were here anyway. They were willing to be here anyway, knowing I might fail, having made arrangements. I wrote, "You planned for my failure, and you came anyway." "Yes," Sari said simply. "That's what it means to try something that hasn't been tried before. You plan for failure, and you show up anyway." I held that in me for a long moment. I held it carefully, like something fragile, something I didn't want to accidentally damage with too much feeling. Then I wrote, "What do you need me to do?" Sari pulled out a smaller piece of paper. Not the map this time, something else. something written in careful, small script. "I've been reading everything ever written about you," she said. "Every account of every crossing attempt, every story, every scholar's notes." She looked at the paper. "In every account, there are two things that happen when things go wrong. The first is that you dream. You move in your sleep." I wrote, "Yes, that is the primary problem." "The second," she said, "is more interesting. In several accounts, not all, but several, things went wrong when something strong happened emotionally. I went still, a different kind of still, the kind that happens when someone has identified something true that you have been avoiding looking at directly." I wrote, "Continue." "The river that changed course," Sarah said carefully. "The accounts from that time. There was an argument, a very emotional argument in a caravan." I wrote, "I remember, yes." "Civilization 3, she said. "The child who cried. You said you shuddered because the sound affected you." I wrote, "Yes, that is exactly what happened each time." Sarah looked at me. At that specific point, she always looked. "I think strong emotion moves you, not just dreaming alone, emotional resonance, when you feel something with great intensity." I wrote, "I have not wanted to think about this specifically. It is uncomfortable." "I know," Sarah said gently. "But we need to face this directly together," Sarah said gently but firmly. "That is the only real path forward from here." She was right. I had always known she was right. I had known since Civilization 3 that it wasn't only dreaming, it was feeling too much. Every time something happened that moved me deeply, every time something beautiful or terrible or unbearably sad reached me through the surface, I moved. Not always dramatically, but I moved, the way a person shivers when they feel something deeply. Except when I shiver, things happen. I wrote, "I have been trying not to feel things for several thousand years. It is partly why I stopped watching people cross carefully." I wrote, "If I don't let myself care about them, I am less likely to react when something happens to them. That has been my strategy." I wrote, "It has not worked very well. The caring happens anyway. I just become aware of it at the wrong moment." Sarah was quiet for a while, reading, thinking. She had the particular quality of thoughtfulness that comes from someone who has been thinking about a specific problem for a long time and has just found the missing piece. "That's it," she said finally. "That's exactly it. You've been trying to suppress the feeling, which means it builds until it breaks through." I wrote, "Yes, that is an accurate description of my experience." "What if, instead of suppressing it," Saray said slowly, "you let yourself feel it, deliberately, with control, the way you breathe deliberately instead of gasping. The way you breathe deliberately instead of gasping. That was a very precise description of a thing I had never tried. I had always either gasped, let the feeling hit me suddenly and move me, or tried to not breathe at all, never just breathed, never just felt it steadily. I wrote, "I don't know if I can do that. I have no practice with feeling things steadily, only with gasping or suppressing." "That's what we're going to practice," Siri said. "That's the experiment. I'm going to say things to you, things that will affect you emotionally. And you're going to feel them," she continued. "Actually feel them, but slowly, deliberately, without suppressing and without letting it break through." I wrote, "What if I fail?" "Then you fail and we move very fast to the evacuation route and we try again when you're ready," Siri said. "That's all. No other consequences. No other consequences. Just try. Just feel it on purpose. Just practice the thing I'd been trying to avoid for 10,000 years." I wrote, "And you believe this will help me have more control?" "I believe that learning to feel things deliberately is always better than the alternative," Siri said. "For people, and probably for deserts too." I wrote, "That is an interesting theory and I cannot argue with it." "It's the only theory I have," she said honestly. "So, shall we actually try? Right now, together this morning?" She looked at me with complete steadiness, waiting. I considered. I looked at the camp, at Devon finishing breakfast preparations, at Orrin already open to his book, at the young notebook keeper. I looked at the camels, who were doing their dignified camel thing and occasionally regarding me with a specific expression of creatures that have seen everything. I looked at Saray, at her patient face, at 12 years of dedication sitting in the way she held herself, at someone who had come to try. I wrote, "Yes, let us try. But tell Orrin and Devon to be ready. Tell them exactly how ready to be. I want them prepared." Sarah nodded. She stood up and went to tell the others, and I watched the preparation happen, and I thought about what was coming, feeling things deliberately, on purpose, with control, the thing I had been most afraid of and most bad at, by design, by choice, the thing that had caused the most damage, feeling too much, unexpectedly, at the wrong moment. And now someone was asking me to do it on purpose. I had 10,000 years of not doing this. 10,000 years of either gasping or suppressing. No middle path, no practice with the middle. But here was Sari, with 12 years of preparation and a plan and people at evacuation positions and complete faith that this was possible. I thought, if she believes it is possible, then it is at least worth trying. That is the minimum a 10,000-year-old desert can offer. Sari came back and sat in her spot. The camp was very quiet now, everyone in position. Oren standing, Devon near the camels. Ready. Okay, Sari said. First thing, I'm going to say something small, something that should produce a small feeling. Just notice it. I arranged the sand. Ready. The camels, Sari said. The way the oldest one, the one in the middle, comes and stands near the edge of your circle every evening. I knew exactly which camel she meant. The oldest one, the steady one, the one that had started walking slightly closer to my circle each day. I let myself notice that, notice the warmth of noticing it. A camel that walks closer to me, a camel that has decided I am worth being near. I felt it. I felt it the way you feel something warm on your face in winter, small and specific and real, and I held it. I held it steadily. I let it be exactly as big as it was without either pushing it away or letting it get bigger. Small feeling, held steadily, no movement in the sand except what I was doing deliberately. Seer was watching. How was that? She asked. I wrote, small, manageable. I felt it and held it, and it did not get bigger than what it was. Good, Sarah said. That's good. That's exactly right. She paused. Something slightly bigger now. I wrote, go ahead. Devon told me what you talked about this morning, Sari said. What you said about carrying the people inside you, about how they are known. I felt it immediately. Bigger than the camel warmth. The feeling of having said something true to someone who needed to hear it. The feeling of having mattered. I held it. I focused on holding it the way you hold water in cupped hands. Firmly enough to keep it, but loosely enough not to crush it. It wanted to get bigger. I felt it pulling toward bigger. I held the edges of it deliberately. The sand moved. A little. Just a very little. A small ripple at the perimeter of my circle. I felt it happen, and I stopped it. I stopped it consciously. I felt the impulse of it, and I met it deliberately, and I held it at that small ripple instead of letting it spread. I wrote, there was a small movement. At the perimeter, I stopped it. I felt it happen, and I chose to stop it. Sarah looked at the perimeter. I saw, she said quietly. That was you stopping it. You did that? I wrote, yes. It was different from before. Before I was always trying to prevent the feeling. This time I felt it, and then stopped the movement. I wrote, those are two different things. I did not know they were two different things before now. Sari smiled, not her small smile. A bigger one, the one that meant something had actually worked. Yes, she said, that's exactly it. She leaned forward slightly. Feeling something and being moved by it are two different things. You can feel without being physically moved. I wrote, I have never separated them before. For 10,000 years, they were the same thing to me. Feeling and moving were the same. I wrote, you have just told me they do not have to be. In practical terms, in actual physical practice, they do not have to be the same. No, Sari said, they don't. You just proved that. I held that. The feeling of having just proven something, of having tried something for the first time after 10,000 years and succeeded even slightly. That feeling was bigger than the others, significantly bigger. I felt it move through all of me like a tide, and I held it. I held it with everything I had. I let it be as big as it was, and I chose not to let the movement follow it. The sand stayed still, the circle stayed intact. 11 people and 5 camels sat in safety while I felt something enormous and chose to hold it still. Sarai was watching. Her whole face had changed. Something in her expression that I had learned in 3 days to read as, this is the thing I was hoping for. But that was a big one, she said quietly. I wrote, yes. The feeling of successfully feeling something is apparently very large. Seer laughed. That laugh of hers. The one I felt moving through all 300 miles of me at once. I held that warm feeling of her laugh completely. I let it be exactly as large as it was, and I kept the sand perfectly still while I held it steady. This is what I learned on day 3. The movement and the feeling had always been one thing to me. They had never been separated, never been named as different. And one morning, sitting at the edge of me with a woman who had spent 12 years finding me, they became 2 things instead of one. Feeling. And then, separately, a choice about what to do with the feeling. That is not a small thing. That is not a minor discovery. That is, I want to be precise about this, that is 10,000 years of something wrong becoming, possibly, something else. Oren had sat back down. I could tell from his posture that he had been ready to run and was now sitting back down and was having feelings about that. Davin was still standing near the camels, but their body language had shifted. The readiness had become something more like witnessing, like being present for something. The notebook keeper was writing so fast, the sounds of it reached me through the ground. Fast writing, the writing of someone capturing something they know is important. I wanted to learn everyone's names, all of them, all 11. I had Sere and Oren and Davin, and now I wanted all of them because they were all real to me. I wrote in the sand, large letters, big enough for the whole camp to read, "I would like to know everyone's names, if people are willing." There was a pause. Then a kind of stir moved through the group. People looking at each other. Then, one by one, they came forward. The notebook keeper was first. They sat across from me and said, "Fen, short for Fentara. I've been documenting this from the beginning." I wrote, "Fen, I know. You are the one who writes down what I say. Thank you. I have wanted to thank you specifically for 2 days." Fen looked surprised, then quietly pleased. "The specific pleasure of having your work noticed by the person whose work you're recording." The snack person sat next, and I finally got what I had been waiting for. "Gale," they said simply. "I make the food. I'm the practical one." I wrote, "Gale, you are also the calmest one. You have been calm since the first moment. That has been useful." I noticed. Gale nodded like this was exactly the accurate assessment. No false modesty, just acknowledgement. A very Gale response, I was learning. The others came in turn. A young woman named Priya, who was an engineer and had been quietly sketching structural plans for something all along. A man named Chorus, who was Sere's cousin, and had come primarily because the family considered someone needed to keep an eye on Sere. 2 young scholars named Lede and Bram, who were students of Oren's, and had begged to be included and been brought as a practical compromise. An older woman named Vessel, who said nothing about her profession, but moved through the camp with the quiet efficiency of someone who did everything. And 2 brothers named Tav and Ren, whose function I gradually understood was to be the physical strength of the group when needed. 11 names, 11 people, all of them real now, all of them with names attached. I wrote, "Thank you, all of you, for coming, for staying, for your names." I wrote, "I have 40 civilizations inside me, and none of them ever gave me their names. You are the first 11 people whose names I know." The camp was quiet after that, the particular quiet of a group of people who have all just felt the same thing at the same moment. Gale went back to the fire and prepared something warm and distributed it to everyone without asking who wanted what. Because Gale clearly always knew. Fen wrote down all the names and the moment in the notebook with the specific precision of someone making a historical record. That is what it was. Oren was very still for a while. Then he opened his book to a new page and wrote something at the top of it that I couldn't see. After a while, he turned the book so I could read it. At the top of the new page, in his careful scholar's handwriting, he had written, "First Contact, Day 1 through 3, Notes on a Living Landscape, and What It Means for Everything We Thought We Knew." I read that title for a long time. First Contact. He had written First Contact. He had named what this was, and he had named it with the full weight of what it meant. I wrote, "Oren. That title is exactly correct, and I am glad you chose it." He read the words, nodded once slowly, and then he began to write in that steady, deliberate way of his, filling the new page with everything that needed to be said. The afternoon of day 3 was the longest I had ever experienced. Not in duration. Objectively, it was a standard afternoon. But in density, in the amount of things that happened in the space of it, in how full each moment was with actual content. Priya, the engineer, came and sat with me for 2 hours. She had been drawing plans this whole time, I had noticed. Now she showed them to me. They were plans for markers, stone formations, things that could be built along the northern route to guide travelers safely. She had been designing them for days already, without knowing for certain that I could understand them. She had just assumed I would be worth designing for. "The idea," Priya said, laying the sketches on the sand in front of me, "is a series of formations, spaced about 3 miles apart along the north route. Each formation was designed to be visible from distance. Distinctive shapes, not natural shapes, clearly intentional, clearly placed by someone. She had thought about material, about weather resistance, about the way sand moved around stone and what heights would remain visible over time. She had thought about all of this before she had any confirmation that it would be useful. She had just prepared, made the thing, in faith. I looked at her designs for a long time, and I found myself doing something I had not expected, contributing, not just listening, but actually helping. I wrote, "This formation," pointing at one in particular with a small movement of the sand beside it, "should be taller. This area has deep sand." I wrote, "In heavy wind, the sand around this point builds up by approximately 2 to 3 feet. The formation needs to be visible above that." Priya looked at the plan. She made a note. "Good. What about this one?" I wrote, "This one is fine. The ground there is rock at depth, very little movement, but the angle should face northwest, not due north." I wrote, "Travelers coming from the eastern approach see the northwest face first. They need to read the formation from that angle." Priya made notes fast. We went through every formation, every one. 2 hours of back and forth, of question and answer, of design and revision. By the end of it, I had contributed more practical knowledge to the safety of future desert crossings than I had in 10,000 years of existing. Because I had the knowledge. I had always had it. I just had no way to give it to anyone until now. Until someone sat down and asked me specifically. Priya rolled up her revised plans and looked at me with the expression of an engineer who has just finished a very productive session. "This is going to save a lot of lives," she said matter-of-factly, not dramatically. Just the factual assessment of someone who does the math. I wrote, "That is what I want more than anything." Priya nodded. She seemed like someone for whom wanting something and working toward it were the same thing. Efficient, clear, very Priya. By early evening, all 11 of them had found their way to different conversations with me. Lette and Bram had asked about the ancient languages. I had spent an hour writing fragments of Civilization 7's language for them, words, grammar patterns, things I had absorbed and held and never used. They were ecstatic in the specific ecstatic way of young scholars discovering something that doesn't exist anywhere else, reverently ecstatic. Tav and Ren had asked about the underground geography, where the rock was, where I was thinnest, how the deep structure of me worked. That was a different kind of conversation, practical, physical, the questions of people who worked with their bodies and needed to understand the ground. Chorus had asked questions about what I had seen, not the civilizations, not the geography. What had I seen that was beautiful? Just that. What had I seen in 10,000 years that was beautiful? I had not expected that question. I had not prepared for that question. It hit me with the force of something unexpected, and I almost moved. I held it. I felt it fully. The sudden overwhelming abundance of answer, 10,000 years of beauty I had witnessed and never been asked about. I held it, and I wrote carefully. The light on the sand at dawn when the first color comes. Every dawn for 10,000 years, still, each time. I wrote, lightning at night, the way it illuminates the dune shapes for one perfect second. Different every time, never twice the same. I wrote, migrating birds, twice a year. They rest on me for one night on their way through. I've been watching the same migration for 10,000 years. I wrote, starfall, the nights when stars cross the sky quickly. I have seen more starfalls than any other living thing has ever seen. I wrote, and this. I wrote this slowly. This week, all of you, this is the most beautiful thing I've seen in 10,000 years of seeing. The camp was very quiet after that, the kind of quiet that settles when something true is said simply. Chorus looked at the words for a long time. Then he said, Saray is going to be insufferable about this. She was right, and she knew it, and now she has proof. I heard Saray laugh from somewhere across the camp. She had heard. The kind of laugh that means, yes, and I'm not even going to pretend otherwise. That was day 3. 11 names. An experiment in feeling deliberately. Designs for markers that would save future lives. Ancient languages preserved. A conversation with Devon about carrying people in grief. An afternoon of practical geography with Tav and Ren. Beauty documented for Chorus. Everything that had been locked inside me by the simple absence of someone to tell it to, beginning, slowly, to find its way out. By the time night fell, I was more present than I had been in thousands of years. More awake, more, I want to use the right word, more inhabited. Inhabited, that is the word. I'd been empty for so long, and now I was inhabited again. By living people. By their questions and their names. I held myself very carefully through that night too. Sarah was right. I was getting better at the deliberate feeling, at the choice, at separating the sensation from the movement, at allowing the first without automatically producing the second. It still required effort. Great effort. But it was effort that was producing results, which was entirely unlike the effort of the previous 10,000 years. In the early hours before dawn, with the camp asleep and the stars doing their slow rotation overhead, I thought about something Saray had said. Feeling and moving are two different things. You can feel without being physically moved. I thought about that, and I thought, this is true for me. And I wonder if it is true for the people inside me too. I wonder if Civilization 1, the Golden Sea people in whatever form they persist, I wonder if they felt something when I held still. I wonder if holding still deliberately with choice, I wonder if that reaches them differently than my desperate failed attempts at stillness. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But I thought about it for the whole night, and by dawn I had decided something. I had decided that trying to find out was worth everything. that whatever came next, whatever we discovered in the experiments and the planning, the trying was the point, the trying together. 11 people and their 5 camels in a desert that finally, after 10,000 years, had something to try for. Dawn came. The stars thinned. The first light turned my sand from gray to gold in the gradual way I loved and had loved for every one of my mornings. Sarah stirred. She opened her eyes and looked at the sky and then at me. "Good morning," she said. I wrote the letters carefully in the new gold light, making them slightly larger than usual so the whole camp might see them when they woke. "Good morning. Day 4. I am ready." And I was. For the first time in 10,000 years of mornings, I woke up into a day that I was genuinely, entirely ready for. If you've been following from the beginning, drop something in the comments. Tell me what Day 3 meant to you, because I think you know. Day 4 came with the particular clarity that only mornings after important days carry. The air was different. The light felt chosen. I had spent the night turning over everything that had happened on Day 3, and I had arrived at a feeling I didn't have a name for exactly. Not happiness exactly, though there was happiness in it. Not relief exactly, though relief was certainly present and accounted for too. Something more like orientation, the feeling of being pointed toward something, of having a direction for the first time in a very long time. I had a direction. People who cared about finding it had given me one. 11 people with names had sat in my circle and asked me things. And today, Sari had said there was more to try. More experiments. More territory to explore in this strange new country of being known. I was ready. I said that, and I meant it. Good morning. Day 4. I am ready. And I was ready in a way I had not been for 10,000 years. Priya came to me first that morning. Before breakfast even, before the camp was fully organized, she came and sat and spread her drawings out. "I've been thinking about the marker system overnight," she said. She looked rested and focused in the way of engineers who solve problems in their sleep. "I want to add something to the original design," Priya said. "Sound markers. Formations that catch the wind at specific angles and hum." I had not thought of this. I felt the idea land in me and immediately understood it. A crossing that could be followed even in a sandstorm. Even in zero visibility. If the wind was right, a traveler could follow the sound. Could stay on course by sound alone when sight was impossible. I wrote, "That is a better idea than anything in my original thinking. How did you arrive at it?" Priya looked slightly pleased in the way that good engineers look when their work is recognized as good. "I heard you shift last night," she said. "A small shift, very quiet. Around the 3rd hour. It made a sound, a low hum through the stone base of the camp, and I thought, that sound." I wrote, "I shifted. I apologize. I tried to hold, but the 3rd hour is when the temperature drop is sharpest, and I sometimes move with it." "No, don't apologize," Priya said. "That's what gave me the idea. The sound the ground makes when you move. I want to replicate it intentionally." I wrote, "The sound comes from where deep stone meets sand. The vibration travels differently through different materials. I know the exact places." I wrote, "There are 17 points along the northern route where the stone-sand boundary is close to the surface and correctly angled." I wrote, "If the marker formations are built over those 17 points, specifically, the wind will do the rest. The hum will be continuous." Priya was writing fast. 17, that's more than I'd hoped. Huh? Give me the locations." She had a fresh sheet ready, pen poised. Ready. I spent the next hour describing the 17 locations in terms she could map. Distance, bearing, geological description, depth to stone. She wrote it all down with the precision of someone who understood that what she was writing was not just notes, but a system. A real system. A system that would allow people to cross me in safety, following sound through darkness and storm and all the conditions that had killed them before. When we were done, Priya rolled her papers and held them against her chest and looked at me with an expression I was learning to identify. It was the expression that meant, this is going to matter, not just for now, for a long time, for everyone who comes after the people sitting here. "How many people do you think have died trying to cross you?" Priya asked. Not cruel, just the engineer calculating the scope of what she was solving. I wrote, "I have approximately counted, across the 40 civilizations, plus the smaller groups between. A conservative estimate is 400,000. The number sat in the sand between us. 400,000. Written in the same sand many of them were now part of. It was a very large number." Priya looked at it for a long moment. She didn't look away from it or try to soften it. She just let it be what it was. 400,000. "Then that's how many people this is for," she said quietly. "All of them. And everyone who comes after. That's the scale of what we're building." I wrote, "Yes, and for the ones inside me too. For them, I want this, perhaps most of all. I want them to know their number stops growing here. Priya nodded slowly. She tucked her papers into her bag, with the careful movements of someone transporting something irreplaceable. I'm going to need 6 months to build this properly, she said. And a team, and material sourced from the right geological deposits. I wrote, I will still be here in 6 months. I will still be here in 6 years. I have nowhere else to be. Take whatever time you need. Priya stood, shouldered her bag, and looked at me one more time. Thank you for the sound locations, she said. Practical, direct, perfect, Priya. I wrote, thank you for hearing the hum and knowing what to do with it. She smiled, a quick, specific smile, the kind that means, yes, exactly that, and went back to the camp. Fen came next, the notebook keeper. Fen sat down and opened the notebook and looked at all the pages of careful documentation inside. I've been thinking, Fen said, about what happens with all of this. After we leave, when we go back and try to explain what happened here. I wrote, I imagine that will be a difficult conversation to have with people who were not present for it. Fen looked slightly rueful. That's a generous way to say they'll think we've lost our minds. I wrote, I have been considered not real for 10,000 years. I am familiar with the experience of being doubted. I want to document this properly, Fen said. Not just notes, a real record, something that could be, I don't know, taught, preserved properly. I wrote, what would that require? Fen thought for a moment. Your words, to start, everything you've written, but also your perspective on history, what you've seen. I wrote, that is an enormous amount of material. 40 civilizations, 10,000 years. It would take longer than you have to write it all. Then we start, Fen said simply. We start today and we come back. We bring more notebooks. We make it something that takes years. That's fine. Something that takes years. They were already planning to come back, already building the coming back into the project from the beginning. I wrote, you would come back, specifically, to continue documenting. Fen looked slightly surprised I had to ask. Obviously, this is the most important thing I've ever done. Why would I stop? I had no answer for that. It was a reasonable answer, the kind of answer that made complete sense and also moved through me like water. I wrote, I want to ask you something about the documentation. I have been wondering how I appear from the outside. Fen poised the pen. Oh, ask me anything you want to ask, Fen said simply, pen already poised and ready, offering full attention without hesitation or reservation. I wrote, when you write about me, how do you describe me? I've been wondering how I appear from the outside, from your perspective. Fen considered this seriously, the way Fen considered everything. At first, Fen said slowly, I wrote, the entity. Then, the desert. Fen paused. Now I write, Kyle. Just that word. Just the name. Like it was the obvious right answer because it was, I held that. I held the feeling of being written about by my name, by someone who was documenting me not as a phenomenon but as a person. The sand moved, just slightly. A small ripple at the perimeter. I caught it. I held it. I brought the feeling in and let the sand stay still. I wrote, that is the correct word. Thank you for using it. That matters more than I can easily express. Fen smiled and wrote something in the notebook. I couldn't see exactly what, but based on the speed and certainty of the writing, I believed it was something worth saying clearly. E-writing, that it was good. The afternoon of day 4 brought something I had not expected. It started with Lete and Bram, Oren's young scholars who had a question. They had been working through the language fragments I had given them the day before. They had stayed up late doing so. I had felt their lamp oil burning. Lete spoke first. We've been cross-referencing what you gave us yesterday with the oldest known language fragments from this region. I wrote, and? Bram leaned forward. 3 of the words you gave us from Civilization 7's language appear in a fragment dated to approximately 8,000 years ago. I wrote, that is not surprising. Civilization 7 was approximately 8,000 years ago by my estimate. Lete and Bram looked at each other. Then Lete said carefully, the fragment we're comparing it to wasn't found in this region. It was found 5,000 miles west. I went still, a different kind of still, the kind that happens when something reconfigures. I wrote 5,000 miles west. There's a connection, Bram said, between Civilization 7 and a culture 5,000 miles west that was previously considered completely unrelated. I wrote, Civilization. 7 came from the west. I remember the direction they arrived from. I remember the smell of their supplies, different plants. I wrote, I assumed they were just another group. I did not know that their language connected to something that far away. This is new information. I wrote, new to me, after 10,000 years. You have told me something new about people I have been carrying for 8,000 years. Letta and Bram both looked quietly overwhelmed in the specific way of young scholars who have discovered something genuinely significant. There's more, Letta said. If the connection holds, and we need to verify, but if it does, there's a trade route implied, a very old trade route. Connecting the eastern continent to the western one, Bram said. Through you, across you, thousands of years before any known trade route existed. Through me, across me. A trade route that ran through my body for thousands of years, and whose traces existed only in the language fragments I carried. I wrote, the languages. I carry more than 40 languages. I have never tried to map the connections between them. It did not occur to me to try. I wrote, but if each language connects to other known languages, then the map of connections is a map of ancient movement across this entire continent. Letta stood up suddenly with the specific energy of someone who has just realized the scope of something. Bram was already writing very fast. Oren, Letta said loudly across the camp. Oren, you need to come hear this right now. Oren looked up from his book. He assessed the situation from across the camp with the practiced eye of a man who had supervised students for 40 years. He walked over with the measured pace of someone who expects to be surprised and has decided to approach that surprise with dignity. Letta and Bram explained what they had found. Oren listened without interrupting, which I had learned was his sign of genuine serious attention. When Letta and Bram finished explaining, Oren was quiet for a full moment. Then he looked at me, not at a general point, directly at me, with the full direct attention of someone who has finally, after 4 days of careful consideration, arrived at a decision. Iration arrived somewhere. He said something in his language, and Sarah, who had drifted over during the explanation, translated quietly for me. He says, I have spent 40 years studying this region. I have published 12 books. I have trained 30 scholars. She paused. He says, everything I have written is incomplete. Not wrong, but incomplete, because the source was never consulted. I wrote, tell Oren, he is being too hard on himself. He could not consult a source that no one knew was available for consultation. Siri translated. Oren listened. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something shorter. Siri smiled. He says, that is either very generous or very diplomatic, and he hasn't decided which. I wrote, tell him, both. I have had 10,000 years to learn that generosity and diplomacy are most effective when they are the same thing. Oren read it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that Siri translated with her voice slightly softer than usual. He says he would like, if you are willing, to dedicate his next book to you, by name, as a co-author, if that is an appropriate concept. As a co-author. Oren wanted to list me as a co-author on his next scholarly book, A Desert, listed as a co-author on a human academic work. I wrote slowly, I would like that very much. I have never been an author of anything before. I have only ever been a subject. I wrote, tell Oren I would be honored. And tell him, first contact, day 1 through 3. It is still the correct title. Oren heard the translation. He smiled. Not the reluctant, almost smile of the first days. A full, complete, genuine smile. Finally, I felt it through the ground, that smile. That particular shift in weight and posture that means a person has let something go. Oren had spent 40 years studying something he could never quite reach the center of, and here at the end of day 4, he had reached it. He had reached the center, and the center had agreed to write a book with him, and he was smiling, and I was holding the feeling of his smile very carefully, holding it deliberately, letting it be as big as it was, choosing to let the feeling fill me without letting the sand move. The movement and the feeling, still 2 separate things. Still a choice I was making. Still, each time, a small miracle of intention over instinct. By the time the sun set on day 4, something had become clear to me that I wanted to say clearly before it got dark and the words dissolved. I rearranged the sand into large letters, big enough for everyone to read from wherever they were. The whole camp at once, all 11 of them. I wrote, I want to say something to all of you, before the light goes. The camp went quiet. Everyone looked at the words. Then, at the place they had each individually decided was my face. I wrote, in 10,000 years I have never had a day 4. I have never had people stay long enough for a day 4 to exist. I wrote, what you have given me in 4 days is something I did not know I was missing until I found it. I do not have a word for what it is. I wrote, the closest I can get from all the languages inside me is a word from Civilization 7. It means, known by those who chose to know you. I wrote, that is what you have made me. After 10,000 years of being known only as a danger or a distance or a death, you made me known. I wrote, thank you, all of you. Devan and Oren and Seer and Fen and Priya and Gale and Chorus and Lete and Bram and Tav and Ren. I wrote all 11 names slowly, one at a time, in the warm fading light of day 4, making each one large and clear. The camp was very still. That particular stillness that settles over a group when 11 people are all feeling exactly the same thing at once, a thing at the same moment. Gale was the first to speak, direct and simple, the way Gale always spoke. "You're welcome, and we're coming back." Then Devan, "We're coming back." The same words, firmer than I expected from someone who hadn't wanted to come at all 5 days ago. Then Priya, Fen, Chorus, Lete, Bram, Tav, Ren, all of them saying it, overlapping slightly, a chorus of the same words in different voices. And Oren last, in his own language, which Sari translated quietly into the settling dark. "We are coming back. That is not a courtesy. It is a plan." It is not a courtesy. It is a plan. I held all of that, the whole weight of it. 11 voices saying the same thing. I held it, and I kept the sand completely still. The feeling was enormous. It was the largest feeling I had held since the first time Sarai smiled, and I felt it travel across all 300 miles. I held it with everything I had, and the sand stayed still, and the night came gently, and the camp made its fire, and I watched the stars appear, one by one. The same stars I had watched for 10,000 years of nights. The same that Civilization 24's astronomers had mapped. Different tonight. The same stars made different by having people underneath them who had chosen to be there, who were coming back, who had a plan. I watched the fire burn low. I watched 11 people settle into sleep. I watched the oldest camel come and stand at the edge of my circle. Just stand there, looking at me with its profound camel dignity. Just being near, just choosing, as camels apparently do, to be present. I wrote in the sand beside it, very small, "I see you too." The camel regarded the words with the expression of an animal that is neither impressed nor unimpressed. Simply aware. Simply here. That seemed right. That seemed like the correct energy for the end of day 4 of everything changing. Simply aware. Simply here. After 10,000 years of being simply here alone, now here with company, here with names, here with a plan. I held myself carefully through that night, and the sand stayed still, and in the morning, Sarah said good morning, and I said good morning back. And it was genuinely a good morning. The way each morning would be a good morning now. Not perfect, not without effort, but good. Because there is a difference, I am learning this slowly, between a morning that arrives because time passed and a morning you're waiting for. I am waiting for mornings now. I am oriented toward them. That is a new thing in 10,000 years of mornings, and it does not feel small. Drop something in the comments if you made it this far. Tell me, would you have come back? Because I need to know the answer from you. Day 5, the last day. I knew it was the last day before anyone said it. I could feel it in the way the camp moved. Purposeful, efficient, the specific rhythm of people preparing to leave. Not running, not abandoning, preparing. There's a difference, and I had spent enough time with these 11 people to know which one it was. Gale was up before anyone else, organizing supplies, with the focused energy of someone accounting for every item before a long journey back. Tav and Ren were checking the camels, inspecting legs, checking loads, the practical work of people who understood what the return trip required. Even Oren was packing his books with unusual tidiness, which I had come to understand meant he was processing something and needed his hands busy. Sarah came to her spot earlier than usual. She sat down and looked at me for a long moment before she said anything. Just looked, taking inventory. "I want to tell you what today is," she said finally. "I want to be honest about it before we get into anything else." I wrote, "I know what today is. I felt it in the way the camp is moving. Today is the last day. You leave tomorrow morning." Sarah nodded. "Yes, we have to get back. People are expecting us. Oren has students. Priya has builders to contact. There are things to do." I wrote, "I know. The things to do are important. The things to do are the whole point. I'm not unhappy that you have things to do." I wrote, I want to be honest, I'm only aware that after tomorrow morning, I will be back to waiting, and I know how to wait." I wrote, "I have been waiting for 10,000 years. I am capable of it. But now I will be waiting for something specific. That is different." Siri read it all. She was quiet for a moment. "That's different," she agreed. "That's actually very different." I wrote, "Yes. Before you came, I waited without knowing what I was waiting for. Now I know exactly what I'm waiting for. That changes everything." Something in her expression shifted. "What are you waiting for?" she asked. "Specifically, name it." I thought about this. I wanted to name it correctly. The right words mattered here, and I had 40 civilizations worth of language to draw on. I wrote, I am waiting for Priya to come back with builders and build the sound markers along the northern route. I wrote, I am waiting for Fen to come back with more notebooks and continue the documentation of what I know. I wrote, I am waiting for Oren to come back so we can write the book together and I can see what he writes about me. I wrote, I'm waiting for Devon to come back and tell me how they're doing. I want to know how Devon is doing in a few months. I wrote, and I am waiting for you, specifically. I am most of all waiting for you to come back. That is the most specific thing I can say. Sarai looked at the words for a long time, a very long time, long enough that the sun moved and the shadows changed and a small wind passed. Then she said, I'm coming back in 4 months. That's already planned. I'll bring Fen and Priya and whoever else needs to be here. I wrote, 4 months. 4 months, she confirmed. I know that's a long time. I wrote, I have spent centuries between visitors. 4 months is not a long time. 4 months is specific, and specific is everything. I wrote, 4 months ago, I did not know your name. 4 months from now, I will have been waiting for Seer, specifically. That is a very different 4 months. Seer smiled at that. The full smile, not the small one. The one I always felt across all 300 miles. Yes, she said, it is. She reached into her bag and pulled out something I hadn't seen before. A small stone, rounded, reddish, clearly taken from this region. I found this yesterday, she said, at the edge of the northern quadrant. I want you to know that I'm taking it with me. I wrote, why? So I have something of you with me while I'm gone, she said simply. A piece of you, to remind me what I'm coming back for. I had no response for that. I genuinely had none. I was a 10,000-year-old desert, and a human being had picked up a piece of me to take home, to remind herself of me, while she was away. A piece of me in her pocket or on her shelf or wherever she kept the things that mattered to her. I wrote very slowly, that is the kindest thing anyone has ever done with a piece of me. Usually people just track it into their shoes and curse. Seer laughed. That laugh. Day 5, and it still hit the same way. It will always hit the same way. I'm certain of that now. The morning moved forward. One by one, the others came and had their last day conversations with me. Each one different, each one necessary. Priya came with final revised drawings. She spread them out and we went through every detail one last time, confirming, refining, making certain. I'm bringing a team of 12, she said. People I trust. I've already identified 3 of them. I'll have the rest chosen within a month. I wrote, tell me what you need from me when you arrive. I want to be prepared. I want to make this as efficient as possible for your team. Access to the stone sand boundary points, Priya said. The 17 locations. I'll need to take measurements at each one. I wrote, I will smooth the sand at each location before you arrive. Cleared surfaces, easy access, the rock will be visible. Priya nodded with the specific satisfaction of an engineer whose requirements are being understood and met. And the northern route itself. I wrote, I will mark it. Not permanently. That is your job. But I will create a visible path, a temporary marking, so your team can see it clearly. I wrote, compressed sand darker color. It will last 6 months before the wind reclaims it, long enough for your team to work from it. Priya looked at me. You can do that? Deliberately? Create a visible path? I wrote, I have always been able to move sand deliberately. The problem was never capability. The problem was control. Seer helped me with the control. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then we have everything we need. Thank you, Kyle. She used my name, naturally, without ceremony, just Kyle, the way you thank a person whose name you know and who has helped you. Kale. Like it was the most natural word in the world. I wrote, thank you, Priya, for hearing the hum in the night and knowing what to do with it. That was the right kind of listening. She smiled that quick engineer smile and gathered her drawings and went to finish her preparations. Purposeful, ready, already planning the return. Fen came next and sat with the notebook open to a specific page. The page, I realized, where the documentation had first been formally begun. I want to read you something, Fen said. What I wrote on the first day when I started the official record. Before I read it, is that okay? I wrote, yes, I would like to hear it. Fen cleared their throat and read in the specific, careful voice of someone reading something that matters. Day 1. First contact with the entity previously known in regional folklore as the Death Desert, the Godless Waste, and in older accounts, the Golden Sea. Fen paused. Then I wrote, initial observations suggest intelligence, emotional capacity, and communication ability far exceeding previous scholarly assumptions. Then, the entity appears to have been waiting. The word waiting is inexact, but it is the closest available word. The entity has been waiting. Fen lowered the notebook. That's what I wrote on day one, before I knew your name, before I knew anything except that you were there and had been waiting. I held the feeling of being described as waiting, correctly, accurately, by someone who arrived on day one and already understood the most essential thing. I wrote, "That is accurate, that is exactly right." I was waiting. I had been waiting for 10,000 years, and you arrived, and I was still waiting. I wrote, "And then you all stayed, and I stopped waiting." That is the most accurate summary of this week that I could construct in any language. Fen wrote something in the notebook, then looked up. "For the official record, is there anything you want to say? Directly. Your own words." Your own words. For the official record. Kyle, the desert, asked to provide a statement for the historical documentation of first contact. I thought about it carefully. I had been communicating in sand words for 5 days, and I had learned a great deal about what words could carry. I wrote, "For the record, my name is Kale. I have existed in this form for approximately 10,000 years. I contain the remnants of 40 civilizations. I wrote, I have never intentionally harmed anyone. Everything that happened because I lacked control and information and contact. I wrote, I now have all three. Because 11 people walked to my edge and chose to speak to me instead of across me. That changed everything. I wrote, I would like this record to include the following. The people inside me are known. They are held. They did not disappear. They became part of something that persists. I wrote, and I would like it to say, for anyone who reads this later, that if you are ever at the edge of something vast and strange and possibly dangerous, I wrote, speak first, ask before you cross. The vast, strange thing might have been waiting for exactly that, for longer than you can imagine. Fen wrote it all down, every word, slowly, carefully, with the handwriting of someone making a permanent record of something permanent. When Fen finished writing, they looked up. That last part, Fen said, speak first, ask before you cross. Can I use that as the epigraph? For the whole document? I wrote, yes, use it. That is what the whole document is about. That is what everything this week has been about. That one idea. Fen smiled, closed the notebook, held it for a moment. Thank you, Kale. This is going to matter to a lot of people. I wrote, it already has, to 11 of them. That is enough to start. Devon came mid-morning. They moved differently from day one. Not lighter exactly, but less braced, less armored, more simply present. They sat in the circle and looked at me for a moment and said, I want to tell you something before we leave, something I've been thinking about. I wrote, I am listening. When I came on this trip, Devon said, I told myself I was coming for Saray, because I couldn't say no to Saray, that was true. But I've been thinking about what I'm actually going home with, Devon continued, and it's not what I expected to find. I wrote, what did you expect to find? Devon thought about it. Confirmation, maybe, that you were real, and that the story was true. Intellectual satisfaction. Something to understand. I wrote, and what did you find instead? Something I can't quite describe, Devon said. Something that feels like resolution isn't the right word, not closure. More like they paused, looking for the word. I waited. I'm good at waiting. More like continuation, Devon said finally. Like the thing I was braced against has become something that continues, that goes forward. I wrote, that is exactly the right word for what I hope they experience. The ones inside me, not ended, continued, differently but continued. Davin looked at the words for a long time. I'm going to come back too, they said. I wasn't planning to, but I'm going to. I wrote, I know. I felt you decide that. I feel wait differently now. I feel the difference between wait that is leaving and wait that is planning to return. Devon looked surprised. You can feel that? I wrote. I have always felt wait. I just never had anyone to tell about it before. Yours is planning to return. It has a forward lean to it. Davin laughed, short and surprised and real, the way all their laughs had been this week when they came. A forward lean, they repeated. Okay, Davin said. Then you know. I'll see you in 4 months. They stood, smoothed their clothes, looked at me one more time. Take care of all of them, Devon said quietly, standing at the edge of the circle. The ones inside you. Take good care of them. Them. I wrote, I always have and always will. That I can promise absolutely. They are mine and I am theirs, and that will not change for as long as I exist, and that will not change. Davin nodded. Something in their face that I could only describe as settled, as placed, as having arrived somewhere and recognized it. They went back to the camp, and I watched them go, and I felt the forward lean of their weight, and it was exactly as I had said. Heading back. The afternoon of day 5 was different from the afternoons of the previous days. There was less sitting, more moving. The camp taking its final shape. Lede and Bram spent 2 hours with me going through more language material. Specific words, specific grammar structures, things they needed for their research. I gave them everything I had. Every fragment from every civilization. I opened the deep layers of myself the way you open a room that has been closed. I had been carrying those languages for thousands of years with no purpose. Now they had a purpose. Now they were going somewhere useful. Tav and Ren came and sat with me briefly. They were practical as always, but there was something underneath the practicality today. Ren said, "We want you to know, both of us, that when Priya comes back with the building team, we're coming too. We want to build this." Tav nodded. "We've been talking about it, the markers. We want to be part of making them, with our hands. That matters to us." I wrote, "It matters to me too, that the people who build them will be people who met me, people who know what they are building and why." I wrote, "Tell me your skills. I want to know how to best use what you bring when you return. I want to be prepared for your specific abilities." Tav and Ren looked at each other. Then they spent the next hour telling me what they knew and what they could do and how they worked. Stone cutting, load-bearing calculations, the specific knowledge of people who had spent their lives understanding how heavy things stand. And I told them what I knew about the ground under the 17 locations, the depth of the stone, the grain of it, the way it fractured. We planned the construction together, 2 people in a desert, planning something that would still be standing 1,000 years from now. At some point during that afternoon, Chorus came and sat and said, "I want to add to my question from yesterday, about beauty." I wrote, "Ask." Then Chorus leaned forward and held the question out carefully. "Have you ever been truly afraid? Not the background caution of existing carefully? Actually afraid?" They held that question out like something fragile and important. "You think fragile?" I thought about this. It was a different question from the beauty question, more personal, more internal, more about what I actually am. I wrote, "Yes," twice. Chorus waited. I wrote, "The first time was the morning after I caused Civilization 1 to disappear. When I understood what I had done, that was fear." I wrote, "I was afraid of myself, of what I was capable of without intending it, of the gap between what I wanted and what I could cause." I wrote, "That fear has been with me every day since, every single day for 10,000 years. I'm afraid of myself every day." I wrote, "The second time was when Seer sat down in the sand and said hello. I was afraid that I would respond wrong, that I would ruin it." I wrote, "That something finally real was happening and I would move at the wrong moment and lose it. That fear was different from the first." I wrote, "The first fear was of my own power, the second was of my own hope. Both were real, both were completely reasonable." Chorus was quiet for a moment, then, "And now, are you still afraid?" I wrote, "Yes, both fears are still present. I am still afraid of my power. That is useful, that fear makes me careful." I wrote, "And I am now afraid of the hope that you will come back, the hope that the markers will be built, the hope that this continues." I wrote, "I am afraid of the hope because it is very large now. 4 days ago it was small and manageable. Now it is enormous and I am holding it." I wrote, "But Seer taught me that holding a large feeling is possible, that I can hold something enormous without being moved by it against my will." I wrote, "So I am holding the hope, deliberately, with choice, and the sand is staying still. That is what I am doing with the fear of the hope." Chorus looked at all of it, the full length of what I had written. Then they nodded slowly, deeply, in the way of someone who asked exactly the right question and got exactly what they needed. "Thank you," Chorus said. "I'm glad I asked." I wrote, "So am I. Those were good questions, both of them. The beauty and the fear. You ask the questions that get underneath things." Chorus smiled. "I've been told that. It's not always welcome." They paused. "Is it welcome here?" I wrote, "It is very welcome here. There is no such thing as a question I find unwelcome. I have been waiting for questions for 10,000 years." Chorus laughed and went back to finish their packing, and I held the warmth of that laughter, the way I had learned to hold things this week, deliberately, with full awareness. As a choice, the sand stayed still. The circle stayed intact. The feeling moved through me, and I let it. Late afternoon, the sun getting low, the shadows getting long and golden the way they do on the last day of things, when everything is more itself. Oren came and sat, not with his book this time, just himself. Just the man, without the scholar's equipment, without the professional armor. He sat and looked at me for a moment, and then he said something in his language that Sere, who had come to sit nearby, translated quietly. He says, "I owe you an apology." I wrote, "You owe me nothing." Oren heard the translation. He said something back. Sari translated. He says he spent 30 years telling people that things like you couldn't exist, that the stories were fantasy. He influenced a lot of scholars. I wrote, he was applying reasonable standards of evidence to an unreasonable situation. That is good scholarship. I do not fault good scholarship. Oren listened. He was quiet. Then he spoke again, and Sayre's voice was soft translating. He says he wonders how many people died because serious scholars dismissed the stories, because no one took the warning seriously. I held that, the specific weight of that question. Oren sitting with the possibility that his careful, reasonable scholarship had contributed to deaths. The careful, reasonable scholarship that was simply trying to be responsible, that had no way of knowing, that had worked from incomplete information. I wrote slowly, Oren, listen to me carefully. I wrote, you could not have known, there was no way to know. The evidence you had supported your conclusions. That is how evidence works. I wrote, the people who died crossing me did not die because scholars were skeptical. They died because I could not control myself. That is my fault. I wrote, not yours, not scholarship's, mine. I have owned that for 10,000 years, and I will own it for however long I continue to exist. I wrote, what you can do, what you are already doing, is make sure the next scholars have better information. That is the correct response. That is what you're doing. Sari translated. Oren listened. He sat with it for a long time. Then he said something short and quiet. Sari translated, and her voice had something careful in it. He says, thank you. He says he needed to hear that specifically from you. I wrote, tell him, I know. That is why I said it. Some things only mean something when they come from the right source. Oren heard it. He looked at the words in the sand. Then he did something unexpected. He put his hand flat on the sand beside the words, the way Sari had done on the very first day. Palm flat on the sand, gentle, not testing or examining anything, just present and touching, just touching. I felt it the same way I always felt Sari's hand, warm and small and real, the specific warmth of someone who chose to reach toward you deliberately, choosing to reach toward you. I rearranged the grains under his palm very carefully, just there, just under his hand, the way I had done for Sari, slowly, gently. Thank you for coming. Oren felt it. I know because his hand pressed down slightly firmer the same way Sari's had. An answer, you're welcome. He sat there for a while with his hand on me, and I held the feeling of it the way I had learned to hold things. Deliberately. Still. Good. Evening came. The last evening. The camp made its fire and gathered around it in the close way of people who know they are separating soon. I watched them. All 11. Gale had made something special. I could tell from the smell of it, from the time they spent on it, from the sounds of appreciation. They talked among themselves in the firelight, and I listened to the sounds of it without understanding all the words and found it was enough. The sounds of 11 people together at a fire. After 5 days of that sound, I had learned it the way you learn music. Not the notes, the feeling of company, the feeling of not alone, the feeling that had no name in any of my 40 languages, but that every human culture throughout history had tried to name. Home. That was the closest. Every civilization I had ever absorbed had a word for this feeling, and most of them sounded like some version of home. I was not their home. They were not mine. But we had made something here in 5 days that had the feeling of it, something adjacent to it, something that would be waited for and returned to and built upon, something with a future attached to it. I had not had a future before this week. I had only ever had a past and a present, an enormous past and a very quiet present. No future. Futures require something to move toward. I had something to move toward now. In the most literal sense, I had a direction, people coming back, things being built, words being written down. The fire burned lower, the stars came out, the same stars, different night. A night I would remember for whatever constituted the rest of my existence. One by one they settled towards sleep. Gale first, efficient as always, then Tav and Ren together. Letty and Bram still talking quietly until Oren said something that made them stop. Priya was last, except for Sari, doing one final check of her materials, making sure everything was ordered and secured for the journey. She looked at me once before she lay down, just looked, the engineer checking her work. Then she nodded once, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Sari remained. She always remained. This had become the pattern of our nights, everyone else sleeping and Sari sitting with me in the dark. She had her stone in her hand, the piece of me she had picked up, turning it over with her fingers in the way you turn something familiar. I don't want to say goodbye, she said. I want to be honest about that. It's not what I want to say. I wrote, then don't. She looked at the words. What do you want me to say instead? I thought about it. All the languages inside me, all 40 civilizations, and their words for leaving and returning and the space between. Civilization 7 had a word I'd always liked, a word that meant specifically the leaving that is also a beginning, the departure that contains its own return. I wrote it in their script, which Lette and Bram were learning, which would be preserved now, which would not be lost. Then I wrote the meaning beneath it, the leaving that is also a beginning. Sarah looked at it. She looked at the script first. Those ancient characters she had spent 12 years studying, turning over in her mind, wondering about in quiet hours, and then at the translation. "That's what I want to say," Sarah said quietly, with complete certainty. "That is exactly it, and nothing else." She looked back at me, the point she had always looked at, the place where my face would be. She had decided that place on day one and never changed it. "I'll be back in 4 months," she said. "With Fen and Priya and whoever else needs to come, we'll build the first markers on the northern route." I wrote, "I will have the path cleared, the stone sand boundaries exposed, the compressed route visible. I will be ready." "I know you will," she said. "I know." She reached into her bag and pulled out something else, a smaller piece of paper different from the map, folded carefully into a small square. "I wrote something," she said. "Last night, while you were watching. I want to leave it here with you, so you have something to hold while we're gone." She unfolded it and placed it in the sand in front of me, weighting the corners with small stones so it wouldn't blow away. I read it. I'm not going to write all of it here. Some things are not for documentation. Some things are between the person who wrote them and the desert that received them. But I will say this. She wrote about the Golden Sea, about Civilization 1, about the name they had given me and how it was the right name. She wrote that she intended to bring that name back, that the Death Desert and the Godless Waste and all the other names were going to be retired. The Golden Sea, that was what she was going to call me, what the documentation would call me, what the markers would be marked with. The Golden Sea, the name Civilization 1 gave me 40 civilizations ago when they arrived singing, before I lost them, before I learned to grieve. That name returned to me 400 years after I had decided to stop hoping it would ever matter to anyone again. I held the feeling of that. I held it with everything I had. I held it through the full size of it, which was very large indeed. The sand stayed still. The circle stayed intact. 11 sleeping people and their 5 dignified camels, safe in the space I had made for them. I held the feeling and I kept the sand still and I thought about Civilization 1, their language fragments deep in me, their remains part of my composition. I thought, they would have liked this. I'm certain they would have liked this. The people who called me the Golden Sea, they would have wanted this. I thought, your name came back. Your name survived. Someone who came 5 days ago with a map and 12 years of preparation brought it back. I thought, you are known. You were always known to me, and now you will be known to everyone. The Golden Sea, your name, returned. I don't know if they heard that. I don't know if any of them heard it. All the civilizations in my depths, all the chemistry that used to be people. But I said it anyway. In the sand, in the dark, with no one awake to see it. I wrote it for them. Not for Sarai, not for the record. For Civilization 1, for all 40. For the 400,000 and all the smaller groups between. For every person I had ever accidentally kept. I wrote, your name came back. You are the Golden Sea. You were always the Golden Sea. Now everyone will know. The sand smoothed over it after a while. The wind took the words gently, the way all my words go, back into the substance of me. But I had written it, and in whatever way anything persists, it persisted. Dawn came slowly, the sky going through, its colors the way it always did, the way it had for 10,000 years of mornings, the way it would go on doing. But I watched it differently now, not as a recurring thing I had no choice but to witness, as something I was oriented toward, something I was waiting for. The camp woke, one by one. Gale first, already moving, already thinking about the logistics of the return journey. Practical Gale, necessary Gale, Tav and Ren to the camels. Lette and Bram, looking slightly tired from their late language work, finding their footing in the morning. Priya up and immediately checking her bag. Yes, everything there. Yes, the drawings were safe. Yes, the plans were intact. Satisfied Priya. Chorus stretching in the particular way of someone who has slept well and is comfortable in their body on a given morning. Chorus in the morning light. Davan was the one I watched most carefully. They woke and looked immediately at the sky and then at the sand, and then at the specific point where I was most present. They looked at me before anything else, before stretching or standing or organizing anything. Just looked, as if checking that I was still there. I rearranged the sand into 2 words, just for Davan, right in their line of sight. Still here. Davan saw it. Something in their face settled. Not relaxed, settled, like a thing that had been uncertain finding its position. Still here. Good, Devon said quietly. Just good. That was enough. That was exactly enough. Oren was last to rise, which I had come. To understand was his pattern. He did not rush mornings. He took them as they came. A man who had made peace with time. He came to sit near me while the camp finished its preparations, not in Sarah's spot. He always chose a different place, respectful of the established geography. He opened his book and read something he had written the night before. His lips moved slightly, checking it, finding it right. Then he looked at me and said something. Sire, who was nearby, translated. He says, he expects the first chapter to be finished within 6 weeks. He wants to know if you have any notes for it. Notes for the first chapter of our book. Notes from the desert for the scholar about the chapter they would write together. I wrote, tell him start with the erosion patterns, the ones that run counter to the prevailing wind. That is where the real story begins. I wrote, that is where someone who paid careful attention noticed something that didn't fit and kept asking why. That is the book, that question and its answer. Oren listened to the translation. He nodded slowly. Then he wrote something in his book and closed it with the careful finality of someone closing something they will open again soon. The preparations were done. The camels were loaded. The camp had become a camp that was leaving, which is a different thing entirely. 11 people gathered at the edge of the circle I had made on day 1. Gathered together and looked at me. At that specific point they had each chosen. I wrote in the sand in front of all of them, large enough for everyone to read at once. I will hold still while you walk away. I wrote, I know that has not always been true. I know the history of people walking away from me. I'm telling you, this time it will be true. I wrote, walk east. The ground is firm. I will not move. I will hold myself completely still until you are out of my range. You have my word. I wrote, and then I will wait. I know how to wait. This time I will wait for something specific. That is a different kind of waiting entirely. I wrote, go build the things that need building. Write the things that need writing. Tell the people who need to know. Then come back. I wrote, the Golden Sea will be here. I've been here for 10,000 years, and I will be here for as long as it takes. However long it takes. The camp was very quiet. 11 people reading. 11 people with their own feelings about what they had just read. 11 different weights shifting. Gale said something short and practical that Sari didn't translate, but that made everyone else laugh, and the laughter broke whatever tension had been building. Good Gale. Practical, calm, unimpressed by drama Gale with the laugh that was always the right laugh at the right moment. Then they began to move, eastward, into the morning light. Tav and Ren leading with the camels, Priya with her bag of drawings, Letty and Bram side by side, Chorus pausing once to look back at the sky, at the particular quality of morning light on sand, filing it away in the specific way of someone who asks about beauty. Devon walking with their head up, forward lean in their posture, exactly as I had felt it. Returning weight, heading back weight. Already leaning toward 4 months from now. Oren walking with his book tucked under his arm, his free hand in his coat pocket, the particular gait of a man who has something to write when he gets home. Fen walking and writing simultaneously, which I'd come to understand was simply how Fen moved through the world, always documenting, always capturing. And Sari. Sari was last. She had let everyone else go ahead. She stood at the edge of the circle for a moment after the others had moved past. She had the stone in her hand, the piece of me she was taking with her. She turned it over once in her fingers and then put it in her pocket. She looked at the specific point, the place where my face would be. One last time in this visit, she looked at exactly the right place. She didn't say anything. She had already said everything. The leaving that is also a beginning. She had said that word, Civilization 7's word. She just looked, and I looked back. And for one moment it was simply that, a desert and a person who had found each other, looking at each other. Then she turned and walked east into the morning light, and I held myself absolutely still the way I had promised, with everything I had. I held still as they crossed the stable ground at my edge. I held still as they moved into the rock territory, the ancient ground, the old stone. I held still as they became smaller, and then smaller still, and then specks in the distance, and then nothing visible at all against the morning sky. I held still even after they were gone, for a long time after, just to be certain, just to honor the promise, just to practice the thing I was learning. The circle I had made was still there. Smooth sand, the 11 slight impressions where they had sat over 5 days, the ash of their fire. Sari's letter, weighted with small stones, still in the sand where she had placed it. The ancient words for the leaving that is also a beginning. I looked at the circle. I looked at the 5 days of impressions in the sand. I looked at the ash of the fire and the letter and the morning light. I felt everything that was to be felt about all of it. I felt it deliberately, fully, with complete awareness, with the skill I had been learning. And I held it, and the sand stayed still. and the circle remained exactly as it was, the impressions of 11 people preserved in the sand. I held it all and I thought, this is what having something to wait for feels like. This is the specific texture of it. I know it now, and I thought, 4 months. 4 months. And Sari comes back with Fen and Priya and the building team. 4 months and work begins on the markers. And I thought, this is the first morning in 10,000 years that I have woken up knowing exactly what comes next. That is not a small thing. That is not a small thing at all. I looked east, where they had gone. I looked at the horizon, where the sky met the old stone and past that the world they were walking back into. I looked at the stone Ser had not taken. There were other pieces of me at the edge of the circle, other red stones from the northern quadrant. I looked at the sky above me, the same sky that had been above me for 10,000 years, familiar as anything has ever been familiar to anything. And I thought about Civilization 1, about the Golden Sea, about the name that had come back from wherever names go when no one uses them anymore. I thought about all 40 of them, all the ones inside me, all the chemistry and bone and artifact and memory in my depths. And I said, quietly, in the sand, in no language anyone living knew anymore. In Civilization 7's language, because they had stayed longest. I said, something is different now. I said, someone came. I said, they knew my name, and they said hello, and they sat down, and they stayed, and they asked what I knew, and they wrote down what I said. I said, they are coming back. They gave their word. I believe them because I felt the forward lean in every one of them when they left. I said, the Golden Sea. We are the Golden Sea again. After everything, after all of it, we are the Golden Sea. And in my depths, in the deep layers where 40 civilizations existed in whatever form they existed, something that felt like the echo of music moved. Just the feeling, just the impression, not words, not thoughts, just the feeling of something heard and acknowledged and received. Maybe that was real. Maybe it was only what I wanted to feel and not what was actually there. I will never know for certain. And that is all right. All right is a different thing from okay. Okay is a flat word, a maintenance word. All right means the thing is as it should be. The thing is right. I am all right. For the first time in 10,000 years of existing in one form or another, I'm genuinely, completely, specifically all right. The sun moved across the sky. The wind moved across my surface. The temperature changed with the passing hours. The stars came out, the same as every day. The same as every day for 10,000 years. And completely, fundamentally, irreversibly different. Because I was waiting now. Really waiting. Waiting for something real that was really coming. 4 months from now, the Golden Sea would have visitors. And the visitors would have markers to follow, and the markers would hum in the wind, and nobody else would be lost in me who didn't choose to be there. That is the story of how it changed. That is the story of the 5 days that ended 10,000 years of accident, and began something deliberate instead. It is not finished. It will not be finished for a very long time. There is a book to write, and markers to build, and languages to preserve, and more conversations to have. There is so much still ahead, more than I can account for, more than 10,000 years of backward looking prepared me to expect. But I am facing it now, facing forward, oriented toward it. The desert that killed 40 civilizations by accident is orienting toward something new. The Golden Sea, waiting, ready, holding still. If you've been here since part 1, thank you. Leave a comment. Tell me what stayed with you. I want to know what part of this you're carrying.